across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. Rayner is on the ropes. The Deputy Prime Minister says that she probably should have paid another £40,000 in stamp duty. She's referred herself to the ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus. What will happen? Will she remain as Deputy Prime Minister? The Prime Minister says he has full faith in her, but Kemi Badenoch, attempting to make some hay out of it, doesn't. She should have taken all 6 questions of Prime Minister's questions against her and didn't. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll also talk about the fact that Graham Linehan, who we talked about yesterday, the free speech advocate who was arrested by 5 armed police officers, is going to sue the Metropolitan Police. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, says the government needs to clarify or change the law. We'll talk about that. Also, the fact that within all that, Nigel Farage has been talking to Congress about it in Washington in the last few minutes. We'll bring you a clip of that and we'll tell you what he has been talking about. There's loads to talk about today, including one story that caught my eye, which is that Wetherspoons pubs in England will now refuse to take £20 notes from Scotland and £50 notes from Scottish notes. So have you ever been in a Wetherspoons or indeed anywhere else with a Scottish or Northern Irish note and been told that it won't be accepted because it's not from the Bank of England? I've been in that position on many occasions. I wonder if you have too. We'll talk about the mandatory digital IDs being considered by the government, an attempt to crack down on illegal immigration. We'll talk to the former Security Minister. And Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, wants to ban energy drinks to tackle childhood obesity. Will that work, or is this just the nanny state that's out of control? Great guests coming on, including Sir Jake Berry, he'll be with us, Jake Wallace-Simons too, Graham Stewart MP, Vanessa Frake, the prisons expert on a prison story about sentencing as well. Loads to discuss, and I want to discuss it with you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember, you can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. So a big political day. We've got the Whitehall correspondent of The Sun standing by and a stamp duty expert to talk through the whole thing. Earlier today, Angela Rayner admitting she may have underpaid tax.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people. But because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Angela Rayner speaking in her office there at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Remember, she is the Housing Secretary as well as the Deputy Prime Minister. She was speaking to Sky News there. A short time later in Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, defended her.
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do. But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working-class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country.
Well, Sophia Slay is the Whitehall correspondent of The Sun. Sophia, I wonder if you could just take us through this. Just tell us, because it's such a complicated story, where is Angela Rayner now? Has she done anything wrong? And what are the consequences of this, in your opinion?
So, sort of in summary, basically, we had a great story in the Sun on Sunday paper very recently that sort of revealed that she had bought a new home down in Hove on the south coast. This, in and of itself, obviously there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it prompted a load of questions because she had, number one, her Ashton-under-Lyne property, which is her constituency property, family home. Number two, she has access to a Grace and Favour property, Admiralty House, which is in central London, and then she had this new property in Hove. So there was all these questions for a couple of weeks, a few weeks over, you know, where was she registered for her first and second home, for stamp duty purposes, for council tax purposes, and throughout all that time, we were basically being told that, you know, she hadn't done anything wrong, and there were sort of no questions to answer. It rumbled on. The media, we all kept asking questions. There was a brilliant report, I think, in the Telegraph that suggested it looked like she may have been able to swerve a sort of stamp duty surcharge worth up to £40,000, which is a lot of money. Today we had this huge bombshell where she's admitted that effectively that is what's happened, but where the questions lie are the intention, right? So she sort of said, she's explained it, that she had this property in a trust, her constituency property in a trust that was put in for her child. And she said the legal advice she took at the time said that that was fine. She wouldn't have to pay this stamp duty surcharge on the second home, or third home actually, in Hove. After the scandal sort of was really quite engulfing her, she sought fresh new legal advice, which now says, hold on, we actually think you do owe that £40,000 stamp duty surcharge. She's referred herself to the sleaze watchdog. Not a great look for someone who was, you know, the sort of sleaze finder general under the, you know, the Tory administration.
She criticised many Conservatives. Certainly she was seen as sort of Labour's attack dog in order to do that. How much risk is there politically to her position, Sophia?
I actually think this could have done irreparable damage to her brand, to her political career. You know, she's long rumoured to want to be Prime Minister and want the top job. She's very popular with the membership, but, you know, as someone who sort of, you know, prided herself on being, you know, the sleaze buster and going after all these Tories, she's really undermined when she's facing allegations of tax dodging. It's not a good look, and I think it's a really bad look for the Labour Party as well. You know, they came into government, Keir Starmer came into government promising to sort of do away with all this sleaze, and they really went for the Tories over sleaze. And I think we're now in a kind of case of those in glass houses. You know, she was always having to go at the Tories, you know, do as I say, not as I do, that kind of stuff. And I think we're just seeing them fall into this trap time and time again. You know, there was a sort of a scandal with a housing minister who, you know, was accused of sort of unscrupulous practices with her tenants.
Yeah, the homelessness minister, Rushanara Ali. This doesn't get better. It's a scandal-hit department. Sophia, thank you. That's Sophia Slay there, Whitehall correspondent at The Sun. Thanks to Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, "Hi Peter, I find it amazing Angela Rayner can just find £40,000 for unpaid tax. Perhaps it's down the back of her settee." Well, we don't even know if she's paid it back yet. We don't think she has, because she's going through all this with lawyers from HMRC, Revenue and Customs. Sean Randall's with us now. He's an independent stamp duty advisor. Sean, you must have been watching this story develop, and was it all a bit predictable to see what has happened now? And what would you advise a client in Angela Rayner's position to do?
Okay, it wasn't at all predictable. So a lot of the focus initially was on whether Hove was her main residence. And if it had been, or if it was now, which it isn't, but if it was, then this problem wouldn't have arisen at all, because she would have accessed an exception to the higher rates for replacing her main residence. However, that's not the case. So everything turns on whether she knew, or ought to have known, that for stamp duty, she was assumed to have still owned the property in Ashton by virtue of her son being under 18 and entitled to occupy under the terms of the trust. Now, she was advised in relation to stamp duty, I'm sure, on her purchase. It forms part of the purchase process. So far, we don't know which firm acted for her on her purchase. We do know that a firm called Shoesmiths, which is a city law firm, acted for her in relation to setting up the trust. And, you know, it would be reasonable for the same firm to have acted for her both in relation to the disposal of Ashton into the trust and also the acquisition of the property in Hove, although we don't know that for sure. But someone has missed something.
Just to say, Kieran Stacey, who is of the Guardian, one of the political correspondents, said Shoesmiths has confirmed it was not the firm which advised Angela Rayner to pay the lower amount of stamp duty on her Hove flat. We still don't know who did and why, and the Guardian has asked the question.
Okay, so that's really important. I didn't know that. So now...
That's just emerged in the last few minutes. There's no reason why you would have known that.
Thank you, yeah. So the focus then should be on Angela in trying to find out why she didn't tell that firm what happened in relation to her disposal of Ashton. And, you know, look, the stamp duty rules are complicated. The particular rule that we're talking about, the one that's hurt Angela in question, it's a deeming rule. It's an anti-avoidance rule, ironically. It's pretty obscure. It wouldn't be at the front of mind of any high street conveyancer if a high street conveyancer was used. But nevertheless, relying on legal advice in isolation isn't normally a defence to a penalty for carelessness.
Well, certainly, as any first-year law student will tell you, one of the main principles of the law in this country is ignorance is no defence, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And so I think in order, one of your questions was what should she do? And I think what she should do is consider publishing the advice that she received and, you know, the advice or the instructions rather that she gave the law firm to show whether in fact the law firm knew or ought to have known of her son's entitlement to occupy the property in Ashton. Because, well, if a penalty is imposed for carelessness, that's quite a big deal.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what led to Nadeem Zahawi retiring or being sacked. So really, the question is whether she took reasonable care in instructing her law firm.
Yeah, okay. Sean, that's really helpful. You've really illuminated that issue, and thank you for your expertise. I really appreciate that. Sean Randall there is an independent stamp duty advisor. Simon's in Derby, first call of drive today. I have a feeling quite a few of you will want to talk about this. 0344 499 1000. Do you think the Deputy Prime Minister should resign? And let me ask Simon that question. Simon, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you think?
Thanks, Peter, for having me back. Yeah, well, I'm self-employed. I have an account with the Inland Revenue, as most self-employed people do, like a bank account. It's your responsibility, nobody else's. So the accountant, whoever it is, does all your books and says to you, happy with those, I'll sign them off and I'll submit it to the government. And that's exactly what they do. So in her case, she would have been much better to have overpaid tax and then argued the case afterwards to get the tax back if she was due to have it. And I'm afraid the buck stops with her. People see pound signs in the eyes and they do things, don't they?
Yeah, well, listen, I think, you know, it's not a good look either for the Housing Secretary. You know, we always refer to her as the Deputy Prime Minister, which she is, of course, but she's also the Housing Secretary. We've already had the Homelessness Minister having to resign over jacking up rent on a house that she had, again, legally. Nothing wrong with that illegally, but it's the spirit of the things as well. And you know, and I know, if a Conservative had done this, if a member of the Reform UK had done this, even maybe if a Liberal Democrat had done this, out of the traps would be Angela Rayner as Labour's attack dog, saying that they're bad people and they should resign.
Yeah, exactly. So it's okay for her to be an entrepreneur, which is fine, like it is for everybody else, but it isn't for everybody else because we're going to get absolutely mullered for tax, and she's in charge of all this stuff. Yeah. For God's sake.
Well, it's Rachel Reeves who's the Chancellor, but nonetheless, she is in a very powerful position, and you're absolutely right, Simon. Do you think she should resign?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, definitely. Simon, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate that. Let's take a look at this clip that we found of Angela Rayner. She posted this on Twitter in 2021 about the former Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
It was actually 2023, that clip. But yeah, if his position as Chancellor was untenable for underpaying tax, is her position as Deputy Prime Minister now untenable for underpaying tax? Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who says, afternoon Peter, while commentators dissect the Rayner property saga, the inescapable fact is she is guilty of an extraordinary lack of good judgment. That bodes ill for any servant of the people and doesn't compare favourably with those who have found themselves in a similar position, done the right thing and then fallen on their sword. Well, thank you for that. Many people getting in touch about this, and Dennis says, good afternoon Peter, I really hope Orange is going to sue whoever gave her the advice that she didn't owe the stamp duty. If someone had cost me £40,000, I'd be somewhat miffed. Have a great show, says Dennis in Manchester. Thank you, Dennis. Mark in Yeovil says, sorry, I don't believe a word from her. She's tried to get a loophole. She was prompted by the press and suddenly she is admitting misinformation from her advisors. This is absolute gaslighting of us again. Mark says, Keir made a whole point of saying Rayner is working class and has become Deputy Prime Minister, yet he claims he is working class from a humble toolmaker and he is the Prime Minister. Is this finally admitting he isn't working class and middle class from a manager of a tool factory, says Mark in Hepburn. I don't care what class people are, I just want them to act correctly and act in the spirit of things and in the law as well. On £20 and £50 notes, this is Wetherspoons, which the pub chain, which says it's not accepting Scottish £20 and £50 notes in English pubs anymore. Simon in West Sussex says, I had a Scottish £20 note back in 1987 when I was a coach driver now, and when I went to use it in England, they said they wouldn't accept it because it's not legal tender. That was in 1987, so nothing's changed. Well, the thing is, it was legal tender then, it's legal tender now. Betty says, Wetherspoons will take anything for payment. It's just marketing. If we all reject English pounds in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, hence the UK will collapse. By the way, I told you Rayner was lying yesterday. Nick says, my local Tesco supermarket won't accept any £50 notes. I asked why. They said there are many fakes in circulation, so they don't take any. Lots more to discuss, both on Angela Rayner and everything else. We'll talk about Wes Streeting as well, because he has said the law should be changed. This is after Graham Lenihan, the creator of Father Ted, was arrested yesterday, and Nigel Farage has been talking to Congress about the issue of free speech in this country. Stay with the home of free speech talk as we discuss this.
I do not think that, every single nanny state issue is an issue with children. I mean, I definitely think that children should be restricted from accessing certain things. For example, I think it's right that under 18s cannot buy cigarettes. Even though they're able to access it, I do think that having a legal age limit is right when it comes to those products. But when it comes to the energy drinks industry, what they have done is the government is looking at targeting one industry when it makes absolutely no sense in terms of the actual harm that it has. I mean, children, about 10% of the caffeine that they're drinking is from energy drinks, right?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tim in Suffolk says, Peter, good to see you, fella. Thanks, Tim. Rayner may be innocent, but will all revolve around evidence found on what she told her legal team. They aren't going to roll over. And another person says, yet again, the UK law system at its best, £1,000 an hour to advise you, and it's still your fault if it's wrong. They give you the answer to the question you ask. And Leslie says, I can't believe the victim excuses from Rayner, divorced, children, working class. The HMRC wouldn't take those excuses from Joe Public. Let me tell you my own experience of HMRC. It changed the way I got paid when I moved from being political editor to being a full-time presenter here. The way I got paid changed. It was a different system. And I told HMRC, right, goes into one account, my salary now goes into a different account. It's really straightforward arrangement, which you have told me to do. They launched a 1-year investigation into my taxes, and found that I had underpaid £200. Now that probably wouldn't pay an HMRC tax inspector for a day, £200. So that's what they found after a year's investigation, where I had to submit all my bank statements, all the pay slips, any other income that I got. I had a couple of shares and things. Yeah, it was a nightmare. And they said, oh yeah, by the way, you owe us £200. Right, okay, great. I mean, maybe you just could have told me that in the first place. And I hadn't done anything wrong either, so they didn't fine me or anything like that. But it's just absurd, and I don't think Angela Rayner's going to get an answer soon. I think this is going to drag on. Anyway, lots of thoughts coming in from you, including Mark I've read that out from Mark in Yeovil. Sue in Dorset says, Angela Rayner's stamp duty, I think it is an unjust tax. I hope it prompts a conversation about tax generally, especially the huge amount you can end up paying. Well, all of us are paying lots of tax, as we know, and certainly there's far too much of it. Is Rachel Reeves going to drop it down in the budget on the 26th of November? That's the day before Thanksgiving in the United States. I think that budget's going to be a bit of a turkey, just as the Americans are eating. Speaking of America, the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage currently speaking to US Congress. Let's have a look at what he said about free speech in the UK.
Graham Linehan, the comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona, and months later he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. He was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on roll-out effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. Don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation.
Nigel Farage there speaking to Congress in America. He's in Washington at the moment. He was criticised by Keir Starmer for going to Washington and not serving the people of Clacton. That's what he said. Let's find out what Fraser Myers thinks. He's the deputy editor of Spiked. Fraser, what do you make of Nigel Farage's comments there?
Well, I think his comments are welcome. They're absolutely right. You know, in Britain, we're in the middle of a free speech emergency. We are arresting comedy writers for making joke tweets. I mean, and you couldn't ask for a bigger contrast between the sort of freedom-loving USA, where the First Amendment protects people from government censorship, protects offensive, violent speech that would make many of us bristle. And, you know, no sooner had Graham Linehan stood on UK soil as he was surrounded by those 5 armed police officers. You couldn't ask for a starker illustration of how far this country is fallen. And I wish Graham Linehan's case were unique. I wish it were an aberration, that, you know, this is a case of the police simply going rogue or going too far, but it isn't. Around 30 people are arrested every single day in England and Wales just for essentially posting tweets that the police deem grossly offensive online. Now, that's just under one.
Where do you get that figure? I haven't heard that figure before. Where's that from, Fraser?
It was reported in the Times. It was some research done by the Times this year, and it's an update on some previous research where they found it was only 9 a day. I say only 9 a day, as if that's you know, not already a high number. Now it's reached the point where it's about 30 a day. So we're talking thousands and thousands of people.
Are the Americans actually in a position to criticise here, given that in terms of immigration to their country, they have banned people who have written things critical of America online? Or is that a separate issue, do you think?
I think there's some hypocrisy. If those of us who are free speech absolutists, we would say that you shouldn't be arresting or you shouldn't be deporting people for their speech. I think that's a bit of a problem. Trump is not a huge fan of free speech by any stretch of the imagination, and he has his own authoritarian tendencies. But on the broader point of what is, you know, the UK doing to its own citizens, what is it doing to people who, like Graham, is not even a British citizen. He just is actually coming back for a court appearance. He's lived here for a very long time. He's a national treasure, but he's not a UK citizen. That does need to be addressed. Now, whether I'm not sure we need the Americans to rescue us. I think that's another aspect of this. We need to sort this out ourselves, because the Americans will have their own.
Do we need Reform UK to rescue us, Fraser? Because they have said, Lee Anderson, the MP, and indeed a number of councillors in a local council in Nottinghamshire have said they won't speak to a local newspaper there, the Nottingham Post. They have said that's an attack on free speech. I just wonder if Reform UK are actually in a position to criticise here.
Yeah, and I remember when jokes were made about Nigel Farage by the comedian Joe Brand, and there was quite a strong reaction from Farage that suggested that he too can be very thin-skinned. I think the problem is that many people are hypocrites when it comes to free speech. There's very few.
I'm going to defend Nigel Farage on that one. If someone said they wanted to throw acid over me, I would be incredibly annoyed by that, and I would probably throw my virtues about free speech out the window if someone, especially someone who should know far better, the comedian, I use the term loosely, Joe Brand, had said that acid should be thrown in his face. I mean, if Joe Brand wasn't arrested for that, and Graham Linehan is arrested for making a joke about punching someone in the googlies, well, then that's two-tier justice as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think we all recognise the two-tier system here, and I think unfortunately that's an inevitable outgrowth of the fact that we're policing speech in the first place. These are always going to be subjective judgments, and it just so happens that right now the police and the justice system are taking them in a certain way because they've been bathed for many years in the sort of DEI ideology. So
well, it's interesting as well. Yeah, it's interesting as well, Fraser, that we've had Wes Streeting, for example, the Health Secretary, speaking to Times Radio a little bit earlier on, saying that he doesn't really agree with this either. We had Andrew Bowie, who is the Shadow Scottish Secretary, on the show yesterday, 24 hours ago, saying he doesn't believe a criminal act has been committed. We've had the head of the Metropolitan Police saying they're in an impossible position and the government needs to clarify the law. Let's actually hear what the Health Secretary told our colleagues at Times Radio this morning.
I think the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have been very clear that with the law and order challenges we've got in our country, we want to see people being kept safe by policing streets, not just policing tweets. And one thing I would say, because it's always easy for people to criticise the police enforce the laws of the land that we as legislators provide. So if we're not getting the balance right, then that's something that we all have to look at and consider.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting there, who previously in 2009 said he wanted to push a Daily Mail columnist under a train. He wasn't arrested for that, Fraser.
No, I'm glad he wasn't, because it is obviously hyperbolic, and I don't believe that the Health Secretary wanted to genuinely commit an act of violence. It's interesting what he said. He's right that legislators must take a lot of the blame. There are a hell of a lot of laws that can be used to shut people up in this country, and those all need to be rolled back. But I also don't think the police are blameless here. We know very well that the law is not always enforced. Everyone knows that if they have their phones stolen, or if they see some shoplifting or a crime like that, the police will take a decision not to enforce it.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are loads of people who call my show all the time, Fraser, who say, I've got the Ring doorbell footage, or I've got my Find My iPhone, I know the building my phone is in, please go and arrest those people. And they say, oh no, we don't have the resources to do it.
But they always seem to have the resources for these free speech cases. So I'll give you an example. If you go back to the Alison Pearson case that people may remember, 2 police officers showed up at her house over a tweet that she admits was clumsy, conflating I think they were 2 Asian men with Hamas supporters. It was not a nice thing to say. She got it wrong.
She made a factual error there, but she shouldn't have been spoken to by police about it.
But what happened was that when her local police force, Essex Police, were made aware of it, they set up what's called a gold group. This is the kind of thing they set up normally in response to a serious terrorist attack. So it's not as if the police are just, their hands are bound. They have no choice but to make these arrests. They are taking these I would call them not crimes. They're taking these speech crimes incredibly seriously, and far more seriously than they're taking the crimes that we want to see them tackle.
Okay.
So there's blame all around. Politicians and police must take the blame here.
Fraser, thank you. Fraser Myers there, Deputy Editor of Spiked. Let's speak to Paul in Bath. Paul, I'm not sure we've spoken before, but thank you for your call. What would you like to say?
Well, I just think that I'm somewhat outraged to listen that another one of the celebrities that we operate around has been arrested yet again for something so bloody silly, really, to be honest with you. He's stated something that he feels strongly about, and that is the very centre of free speech in our country.
And I don't think he's broken the law either. I don't think there's any... I can't see how he could incite violence by this.
Well, this is the very fact. You see, when men get together, and I think we're still allowed to say men, when men get together, very often the subject that we talk about is the safety of women. We're all worried about our daughters. We're all worried about our wives and our friends that are girls as well. Nothing has changed in that respect in terms of good men looking after women, in terms of chivalry. And one of the things we would do, for sure, is do exactly what he's suggested we would do. If I saw a man dressed ridiculously, trying to get into a changing room with my daughter, you can be damn sure I'd have a conversation with him, and if all else failed, I'll drag him out by his hair. He's not going into where my wife or my daughter is concerned. If he wants to be identified as a fridge, I couldn't care less, but I'm not going to buy into his dream. So what I think we should do is to support Graham Lenihan, retweet his post in full. There's 70 million people in this country. It's probably 80 million by the time this phone call has ended. But there's 70 million people on this. Let's say 35 million of us all decide to retweet that post all at the same time. Have the police got the resources to send armed response to our homes, 5 of them, one at a time? They're not going to be.
Especially if there are some of us like Angela Rayner who have 3 homes. Paul, listen, thank you for that. That's a really good call, really interesting. And Paul, give me a ring anytime. I think it's the first time we've spoken, but you're welcome to ring anytime. Thank you to Mike in Lincoln. He says, I'm utterly pig sick of the rank hypocrisy of the Labour Party, especially my government will be whiter than white. Keir Starmer and his deputy Angela Rayner, they're embroiled in even more sleaze than the Tories were, and none of them seem willing to fall on their swords when they transgress, having called for every minor infraction by the Tories to yield a resignation or sacking. I'm just sick of them. We still have nearly 4 years of this disaster to get through. And Darren says, what a surprise regarding Rayner, another politician who is sorry they got caught. All the same, different colour, but same thing. Different parties, but same thing. We'll talk to the former security minister in a second about mandatory digital IDs. These are being considered to crack down on illegal immigration. Will they work? We'll ask Lord West in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, when I was a copper, I was able to use discretion, throw in some logic and common sense. And what do you get? Respect. That's breaking down when it doesn't have to be that way. And yes, police do have a choice, says Elisa, who's a former copper herself. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I want to talk about something the police may end up using, which is digital IDs. This is thought that they would be used to crack down on illegal immigration. And Keir Starmer has raised this again. He's talked about it with his top team. He's accelerated a review of options around the technology that could require all adults to show their digital ID when applying for a job to prove they're in the UK legally. This is after pressure from Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, who demanded the UK lower the pull factor of illegal working as part of a deal in July that led to the so-called one-in, one-out migrant returns deal. As we know, it's about 20 in, one out. But anyway, Admiral Lord West, Alan West, is with us now. He's a former Security Minister under Gordon Brown, a peer in the House of Lords and a member of the Intelligence and Security Committee. Lord West, do you think this is a good idea?
I think it's a very good idea. I think what was very sad is that the identity cards that we introduced, in fact, I was a Home Office Minister, and we introduced these in 2009-10, that the coalition government came in, and Nick Clegg, who hated, he said, oh, you mustn't get data, personal data on people, and they threw it out. And of course, Nick Clegg then went to work for some of the biggest data collectors in the world in America, which was a bit of a laugh. But sadly, we'd then lost that opportunity of having identity cards based on biometrics that could be used not just to identify exactly who people were and that they were who they said they were, but would enable them to go and claim benefits, to do all the things, go on all the government websites, to use them to get those. It could be used in lieu of a passport, and it's much cheaper. It had a whole mass of benefits, and certainly the identity cards will make it more possible to identify who are illegal immigrants who aren't entitled to go and have a job, and what benefits they can claim, and etc.
Alan, I'm just really glad I have a cup of tea beside me to calm me down after any suggestion whatsoever that Nick Clegg would in any way be a hypocrite. It's just very, very hard to take in. I wonder, there are a lot of people who believe that, and I'm one of them actually, if I'm honest, that the metadata is the problem, the data about the data, the fact that the government can put together lots of different things. It can tell my doctor, hypothetically, what I'm buying at the supermarket and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and that there can be, I mean, I'm not being conspiracy theorist here. I'm not saying that, we're moving towards social capital in the way that China does. I'm not saying that for a second. What I am saying is that what we know from the Afghans who've come over here, from the big data breaches that have happened in the last few weeks that we've read about and had been, I think justifiably, injunctions had been brought out about that. We know that the government is not always great at holding data securely. That must be a concern for you as well.
Absolutely. So, looking after data is really, really important. But I don't think we want to have that as a reason not to do this. Already, we have huge amounts of data held on all of us. When I used to give a lecture, and back in 2010 when we were introducing this, I used to say, well, who's on the front row? What's your name, so and so? And I got my team just to go to DVLA, all the other things, and I'd tell them, what his age was, where he'd been born, what his car was, where he did his shopping, because we could get that from Nectar cards and all this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was unbelievable, and all that stuff was held by people who I trust even less to look after data.
So essentially,
than I do the government.
Well, is the message then essentially it's all out there anyway, and it's with people that it's with companies that you perhaps don't trust entirely? So actually, digital ID is not much of a greater extension of that, because there will be a lot of our viewers and listeners, Alan, who are quite worried about this, who think that this is government overreach or would be government overreach, and this is Keir Starmer trying to tell us how to live our lives.
No, I mean, I think you've hit on a good point there. The point is that actually so much data is now available from people who I don't trust at all, and and I don't think the average man in the street understands he's giving this data away. And I think having a proper ID card which has everything, everything on there, which is why the data has to be looked after so carefully, with biometrics, does give that better control and access to people who who otherwise can't get into things like the allowances and benefits they can get.
Are we honestly in a position,
and all these things?
Are we honestly in a position where NHS receptionists would say, I'm sorry you don't have a digital ID, we're going to refuse you medical treatment because you're an illegal immigrant? Is that something that this would honestly mean happening?
Well, I think it goes back to that. You said that some ex-policewoman phoned in and said use common sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone arrives at A&E and is seriously ill, dying, then the whole ethos of our NHS would look after them. You will then check, though, I think, and say, well, who is this chap? Well, oh gosh, he came over in a boat 3 weeks ago, and he's now trying to get his. You know, I think that way we can pin things down, and I think the illegals will find it. They won't be quite so excited about coming. They won't be able to do the things they've been able to do, and that is a good thing. I think we need to just get this a little better coordinated. But I share. I mean, obviously there is a real worry when you've got data that someone can get hold of it. But generally, the government tries very hard to look after it, harder than any of these other outfits do. And it's not going to be used easily if all the correct safeguards are put in place. You can never say never. I mean, I agree. And there is always a worry when there's so much data that there's always a worry. But okay. I believe the benefits outweigh it, and we've just got to absolutely concentrate on making sure the biometrics are good, that we look after these things properly, that we do look after. They put in draconian laws to protect data. But that way, I think we will be able to, yes, control the illegal immigrants more. Although, having said that, it's all very well knowing they're legal, can't get a job. They've got to have somewhere to be kept. And I think, 5 years ago, I was told off horribly by everyone, saying I was a sort of nasty beast, because I'd said we need to build proper camps, with good accommodation, where we can actually put these people until they've been processed, and we need to speed up processing. And we still haven't done that properly.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Alan. Listen, thank you for your contribution this afternoon. That's Alan West there, Lord West, who's a former security minister under Gordon Brown, former head of the Navy as well as Admiral, and he's a Labour peer in the House of Lords and a member of the Intelligence and Security Committee. Stephen in Bristol says, good afternoon, Peter. Regarding Rayner, the Labour Party is very good at chucking it, but they don't like catching it. I think you're absolutely right. And thank you to Stephen in Belfast. He says, Angela Rayner is the epitome of a champagne socialist. Rules for thee and not for me. David in Gozo, which you may know is an island off Malta, says Rayner had bad legal advice. Maybe it was perhaps given a trainee solicitor. Maybe the business secretary, perhaps. He was a fully fledged solicitor. Oh no, that's right. He lied to Parliament. That's right. Yes, thank you for that. Tony from Stratford-upon-Avon here. I doubt Angela intended to evade tax as the Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister. It's very embarrassing for her and the government. If that's the be-all and end-all, then she may well have been able to cling on. However, given her approach to her opponents in similar positions, unless she resigns, her integrity and honour will never recover because of the rank hypocrisy. Digital ID is something you've been getting in touch about as well. Ray is a caller from Cornwall, has given us a call, 0344 499 1000. Ray, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on the air. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to say that how would these IDs work with the immigrants that have no identification? How are you going to find out who they are?
Well, it's a very fair point, and I think one of the points that I think about this is, why should we have to have a digital ID when we've done nothing wrong? And actually it's people who are here illegally in this country who won't have one. And what are the consequences for them as well? Are we going to refuse them NHS treatment? I don't see that happening.
No, exactly. Could I just bring up one other point?
Of course you can.
Nigel Farage has not been invited to the President of the United States function when he comes over here.
That's right, the state dinner, yeah.
Do you think he's going to ask where Nigel is?
I think he probably should.
His answer is going to be.
Yeah, well, I think he probably should. I think there's a very fair point for reform as well, because they are leading in the polls, 35% in the polls. They also have had 6 MPs elected. Okay, there are only 4 of them who are still members of the party, but there are much smaller parties in the House of Commons who have members of the House of Lords. I think reform should have some Lords as well. Ray, I wonder what you think about that.
Exactly, yeah, I totally agree. Totally, yes.
Okay, thanks very much, Ray. Really appreciate your call. That's Ray in Cornwall there. Thanks to Tonya, who says, never hear Keir making a point of saying Nigel Farage isn't in the House or his constituency when Starmer spends more time away on international business than in the UK. I'm not sure that's true, actually, but it feels like it. And now Rayner, who has declared her home as Brighton, which is miles away from her constituency. It's a very, very good point. Ellie in Shropshire says, honestly, I think Angela Rayner should resign. The whole look of this is very bad. If she's broken the law or not, it's hypocrisy and looks as if she tried to scam the system. People don't like this sort of going on by MPs especially. And Jane says, we have only got to this point because a few in the media asked questions. If it had been a Tory, they would have lost their job long ago. And Bill Groombridge in Crowborough says, Starmer is proud of Rayner and Reeves. Heaven help us when he wakes up. Plenty more to discuss. We're also going to talk about West Streeting planning and a ban on energy drinks to tackle childhood obesity. There's some supermarkets that don't actually sell them already. We'll talk to the former Health Minister, Jim Bethell, in just a minute. Stay with us.
I do not think that, every single nanny state issue is an issue with children. I mean, I definitely think that children should be restricted from accessing certain things. For example, I think it's right that under 18s cannot buy cigarettes. Even though they're able to access it, I do think that having a legal age limit is right when it comes to those products. But when it comes to the energy drinks industry, what they have done is the government is looking at targeting one industry when it makes absolutely no sense in terms of the actual harm that it has. I mean, children, about 10% of the caffeine that they're drinking is from energy drinks, right?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about a plan by the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, to ban the sale of energy drinks to children. These are high caffeine energy drinks. He talks about the war on childhood obesity. He wants to make it illegal to sell energy drinks containing more than 150 milligrams of caffeine per litre to anyone under 16 across all retailers, including online, in shops, restaurants, cafes and vending machines. It said it could prevent obesity in up to 40,000 children and tackle concerns such as disrupted sleep, increased anxiety and lack of concentration, as well as poor school results. Some supermarkets, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Morrison's and Asda, have already stopped selling the drinks to children. James Bethell, Lord Bethell, is with us, former Conservative Health Minister. James, do you think this is a good idea?
Yeah, Peter, it's been on the blocks for a long time. It should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. The government backed down. But parents are crying out for help on this one. Listen, 160 milligrams of caffeine in a drink for, say, a 14, 15-year-old. My goodness, have you ever tried one of these drinks? I had a can
I've sort of had a sip of one once, I must say, but I'm not really into kind of Monster or Red Bull or any of those kind of things.
It took me back to my Ministry of Sound days. It made me feel invincible for about 30 minutes and made me want to run around in circles. And, the effects were with me for the rest of the day. The idea that our children should be drinking these before going to school is absolutely inappropriate. And there are some kids, not all kids, but their minds are wired in a way that does make them addicted to this kind of impact, this kind of dopamine, this kind of high energy, and it does lead them to do other risky behaviors, whether that's drinking or taking drugs. So listen, I don't want to get sanctimonious about this stuff, but it's completely bonkers to try to sell these kinds of drinks to kids, and the government should have cracked down on this a long time ago.
How realistic is it to say to retailers that you've got to ID people at 16 for energy drinks? And the age-old thing, I remember it when, I shouldn't be confessing to this, but, getting older kids to buy you some alcohol, for example, because they're over 18 and you're not. I mean, all of that will just happen, won't it, James?
No, the world's changed. Peter, if you're 15 years old these days and you try to buy a pack of cigarettes, or if you're 17 and you try to buy a drink, it's not like when we were kids. Actually, retailers behave very responsibly on the whole. There are smaller operators who maybe are cutting corners, but on the whole, mainstream high street retail is extremely thorough these days, and the age verification protocols, both in terms of the identity and also the training to staff and the management commitment, is really high. So no, the world has moved on quite a long way since we were kids.
Do you think that it is, there'll be the inevitable criticisms that this is nanny statism, but maybe you could address that, and maybe we could talk a little bit about the parents. It does seem to me, in regard to things that are corrosive, I think, kids spending far too long on phones, for example, energy drinks, vaping, a lot of these things are corrosive in a way that perhaps alcohol and maybe drugs were when we were younger, James. But we're in a situation where parents seem to be increasingly looking to the state to ban these things or create rules around that. Shouldn't they just be better parents?
No, listen, the modern world has some very addictive products available to kids. I think you're right about the phones. These have got algorithms with billions of items of data driving them, billions of dollars of investment, the best psychiatric research put into making them as addictive as possible. They have a dopamine escalator that means that the content becomes more and more extreme. And you and I, maybe we have to fight it off, and it's not right to regulate it for adults, but for kids, their minds are still very plastic, very adaptable. Their assessment of risk is very poor. So for the drinks, for the drugs, for the alcohol, for the algorithms, and for the gambling, we should be totally hard over on protecting our kids from these addictive products. And parents are crying out for support. It's really tough. If you have the feeling that all the other kids in your school are on Instagram or on TikTok, and you're the one pariah who doesn't have a connection, that's a miserable life to live. There's huge social pressure. So we as a society, and that sometimes means government, sometimes means schools, sometimes means retailers, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with parents. We've got to show them some support. They can't fight these nasty addictive products on their own.
You call them nasty and addictive, and I'm sure they are addictive. What about the companies themselves? Prime, Red Bull, Monster, Relentless. What responsibilities do they have in all of this? They are arguing that their marketing doesn't market to 16-year-olds, for example.
Well, that's cobblers, isn't it? I mean, have you seen the ads? They are quite clearly featuring cartoon features and depict a life that is very attractive to kids. Listen, it's a mixed bag. There are many people in the drinks industry, the tech industry, who are doing the responsible thing. But too often we are seeing corporates, big corporates who should know better, trying to drive into the children's market. Why do they do it? For all the same reasons. Because once you get a kid addicted at an early age, you will have them for life. That's what the tobacco industry did with the Camel cigarettes and so on. On the internet, 25% of internet traffic is probably kids. And therefore, if you try to cut kids off your page views, you're going to lose a lot of traffic. And for the, I remember Two Dogs and Bud Ice. Do you remember all of that?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Of course. Now, the alcohol industry has largely moved on, but this caffeine drinks industry, they are seeing an opportunity, as is the vapes industry with the children. And I think it's reprehensible that they should either be marketing to them or driving product into channels where kids are going to be most vulnerable to poor retail practices.
Okay, James, thank you. That's Lord James Bethell there, the former Conservative Health Minister. I appreciate him joining me on the show today. Lots more on Angela Rayner. Loads of people getting in touch about Angela Rayner, including Paul in Spain, who says, amazing how her especially slagged off the previous government for not being transparent. Scum, she called them. Then you have Flip-Flop himself telling everyone how to translate transparent. His government should be abhorrent. Great show, mate, says Paul in Spain. In fairness to Angela Rayner, she did apologise for calling Tories scum. Still wasn't a very nice thing to do. Scott in Dorset says, so we have a housing secretary who's fiddling the tax affairs on her house, a homelessness minister making her tenants homeless and hiking up the rent, a corruption minister charged with corruption in Bangladesh, and a prime minister who can't buy his own clothes. I thought the adults were back in charge, says Scott in Dorset. What an amazing text, Scott. You've just said it all brilliantly. In fact, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take a picture of that on the screen and refer to it and pass it off as my own. Your fee will be 0p. Lots to discuss in the next hour. We'll talk to Jake Berry in a minute. We'll talk to him about Nigel Farage. We'll talk to him about Angela Rayner and everything else we're discussing today. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, it's just gone 5 o'clock. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you for your company. Rayner on the ropes, the Deputy Prime Minister on resignation watch because she has underpaid probably £40,000 of stamp duty. She's got 3 homes. It's really complicated. It's so complicated she didn't know what she was doing, and now she says she was given bad advice. She's referred herself to the Ministerial Standards Advisor, and she's talking to HMRC about how much tax she actually owes. We'll talk to Sir Jake Berry in a second, former chairman of the Conservative Party, also a spokesman now for Reform UK. He's joined that party. We'll talk to him. We'll also talk about Avon and Somerset Police, who've given us a statement on Bob Villan. We'll talk to Jake about that. Also, the cosmetics chain Lush closing all of its stores and shutting down its website in a protest over, guess what, Palestine. I don't think I remember them closing their stores and shutting down their website after the 7th of October somehow, almost as if they're one-sided in this and don't care about the humanitarian catastrophe visited on the Israeli people. We'll talk about the sport as well. We'll also talk about the fact that half criminals could avoid jail under Starmer's sentencing shake-up. We've got some more detail on that. We'll talk to Vanessa Frake about that. Former prison governor who's written a book called The Governor, which must, by law, be said in that voice. Lots to discuss. I want to discuss it with you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. We're also discussing whether Wetherspoon should stop you spending Scottish £20 and £50 notes in their pubs. What do you think about that? Let us know. Loads to talk about. Jake Berry's coming up in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, as I said, Angela Rayner is under pressure. Earlier today, the Deputy Prime Minister admitted in a Sky News interview that she underpaid tax.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people, but because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Yeah, it's funny actually, someone has mentioned, I'm struggling to find this actually on my screen, but someone said she doesn't quite seem to have the same pep in her voice. She doesn't quite seem to have the same energy, I suppose, in regard to how she often criticises other people for similar things, including Nadhim Zahawi. In fact, we have that clip as well. Maybe we can play that now, actually. Nadhim Zahawi was the former Chancellor. He was a Conservative Chancellor, and Angela Rayner said that he should resign because of his tax affairs and when he underpaid tax. Let's see what she said. This is in 2023.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
Interesting. So his position's untenable in 2023, the former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi, when he didn't pay the tax he should have paid. We know someone else who hasn't, but unsurprisingly, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, well, he rallied to Angela Rayner's defence of Prime Minister's questions today in the House of Commons. Let's have a look at this.
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do. But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working-class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country.
Deputy Prime Minister is building 1.5 million homes. She's not going to live in all of them. She's only got 3, so that's the main thing. This was the view of the independent stamp duty advisor Sean Randall, who spoke to this show in the last hour.
So the focus then should be on Angela in trying to find out why she didn't tell that firm what happened in relation to her disposal of Ashton. And, you know, look, the stamp duty rules are complicated. The particular rule that we're talking about, the one that's hurt Angela in question, it's a deeming rule. It's an anti-avoidance rule, ironically. It's pretty obscure. It wouldn't be at the front of mind of any high street conveyancer if a high street conveyancer was used. But nevertheless, relying on legal advice in isolation isn't normally a defence to a penalty for carelessness.
Independent stamp duty advisor Sean Randall speaking to me a little bit earlier. Well, Sir Jake Berry is with me now. He's a former Conservative Party chairman and a spokesman for Reform UK. Jake, what we have is a Deputy Prime Minister who has gone over and above in setting out the details, says the Prime Minister. No doubt you're going to rally to your defence.
Good afternoon, Peter. Lovely to see you again. And
you
can
too,
I start
Jake.
by saying how much I'm looking forward to reading your new book, to give you the plug that I'm sure you...
Thank you, Jake. Very kind of you.
Look, this is complicated, as well as having spent some time in politics. I'm actually a property lawyer as well. So I'm going to try and slightly, if I may, demystify this for your viewers.
Go ahead.
So the first thing is, Angela Rayner does have a little bit of form on this sort of thing. So if you cast your mind back to April 2024, Lord Ashcroft published an unauthorised biography of Angela Rayner, which looked at the fact that she did previously own 2 houses in Greater Manchester. And there was an allegation at the time, back in 2024, that she had been a bit confused, which was her primary residence. Then she was married. She claimed her and her husband, this is what she said at the time, I'm just looking at the reporting here on the BBC, she claimed her and her husband, even though they were married, lived in separate properties. There was an allegation that when her right to buy council house that she'd bought for 27 grand and then sold for a £48,000 profit just a few years later was sold, that capital gains tax should have been payable because married couples aren't allowed to have 2 principal residences. So she has a bit of form on this, and in that case she made a categoric statement that all the tax had been paid and that there was nothing to see here. Let's not forget, only a week ago that's the same statement she was making about the property in Hove. And fast forward just a few years, and you've got these very complicated arrangements that seem to have arisen from Angela Rayner's financial affairs following her divorce from her husband and what she describes as a settlement in favour of her son, I guess probably, and this is a guess because she hasn't confirmed this, following a court case against the NHS about his care when he was a baby, and a complicated trust that has been set up for the benefit of her disabled son. And then she appears to have sold a share, 25% share in her own house to her son's trust, taken the money out and bought this property in Hove, and has today admitted that the right stamp duty hasn't been paid on it. So it's complicated. I hope that may have demystified it. But I think her statement, in fact, raises as many questions as it answers. You know, number one, I would be interested to know, and I say this as a father of a disabled child, I'm not criticising her for it. You know, did her and her husband sue the NHS? That is certainly something that wouldn't be popular with Labour supporters, but I can say as a parent, it's exactly what I would do, so I don't hold it against her. Number two, you know, why does your child have to buy his home from you through his trust? Most parents, I think, would expect to leave their home to their children to give their children stability. And also, why have you placed such reliance on the advice of a law firm? I can tell you as a lawyer, every single letter you send to clients in a house purchase, I've done thousands of them over the years, says we do not provide tax advice because lawyers are not tax advisors. So I think there's those 3 questions that are hanging over Angela Rayner, which her statement leaves unanswered.
You've put on your property lawyer hat to go through those issues. Put on your political hat now. Can she survive as Deputy Prime Minister?
I think probably yes, and the reason she can probably survive is that Keir Starmer is so unbelievably weak. He is in such a weak position in his own political party. He clearly has a chancellor who isn't popular with the general public, in my view, and I would say this, wouldn't I? It doesn't have what it takes to be the chancellor of our country. We've seen inflation skyrocketing, cost of living getting out of control again. Bond yields, the amount of interest the government pays on its debt goes through the roof. And he didn't have, when he did his mini reset at the start of this week, let's not forget he relaunched on Monday.
We're in phase two. We're in phase two.
Today is Wednesday and it's not going well.
Jake, actually, I've been told by a senior Labour source of mine, deep in the heart of Downing Street, what's coming next, actually, and I can exclusively reveal it's phase 3.
Well, I bet the British public's waiting with bated breath. We're 3 days on from the relaunch in phase 2.
It's not going particularly well, is it?
It's going terribly, isn't it? But in that relaunch, he basically all but fired his chancellor by recruiting a load of people who are going to be running the Treasury into Downing Street, but he doesn't have the strength to sack her. And I would assume it's the same thing for Angela Rayner. There are all these unanswered questions, some of them very difficult to answer. And as I say, we both have a disabled child, so I understand the desire to keep things private and the desire to make sure your child is looked after in the future when you're not around. It's a really stressful thing as a parent to think about. I just sit here scratching my head about some of the decisions that have been made.
Well, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And in terms of scratching your head, I think we're all scratching our head about the arrest of Graham Linehan as well, and the leader of Reform UK, your new party, Nigel Farage. He's been speaking to Congress in Washington DC about free speech. This is what he's been saying this afternoon.
Graham Linehan, the comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona. And months later, he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. He was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on rollout effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. Don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation.
Jake, I am not defending for a second the arrest of Graham Linehan. I don't think it should have happened. I don't think it's a desirable thing. I don't think he's broken the law. That has been backed up by Andrew Boy, the Shadow Scottish Secretary. Wes Streeting's been talking this morning. He says that the police should have other priorities. But we're not North Korea, are we?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the number of people who've been arrested in the United Kingdom in the last 12 months for putting messages online, some of which have been illegal, some of which, in my view, haven't been, like the messages this Irish comedian's put on. There's been almost 7,000 people in the United Kingdom arrested for online communications by the police in the last 12 months. If we then look at a pariah state like Russia, a brutal warmongering dictatorship where people are not free to say what they want, to criticise the government. And look how many people they've arrested. They've arrested fewer than 1,000. So nearly 7 times more people have been arrested in the United Kingdom for putting things on the internet than in that pariah state of Russia. That should be something that we are all deeply, deeply concerned about. And actually taking these comments, this guy's a comedian. I read last night, I read these comments to my wife as we were going to bed. And I'm not going to repeat them because I might get a knock on the door from the police myself.
But one of the things he said is that if you're worried about a trans person, you should a trans woman who is still genetically a man, you should kick them between the legs, because I can tell you as a bloke, any bloke will tell you that is not a nice thing to happen. My wife burst out laughing and said, that's a really funny comment. I think it was a joke.
Yeah.
And you've got a guy, she hadn't seen the news that day, she hadn't checked the story, she didn't know why I was reading it to her. She went, that's really, I think that's quite funny. It's quite a funny thing to say.
Also, Jake, I know your wife, and she's a heck of a lot more sensible and intelligent than either of us. So, you know, she's a very smart woman.
So, when this law was passed through Parliament under the Conservative government, of which I was part, some of the things that were said in the debate, and I went to many of the debates, is this will stop comedians telling jokes. And we were told by the government it absolutely would not. Guess what? It has. And then there's a whole second part of this, that these tweets were actually, as we've just heard Nigel Farage says, put online 4 months ago in America, where under the First Amendment, under the American Constitution, the free speech is a constitutional right. So I think there's a real sort of jurisprudence question for people who are interested in the law about whether actually this could create something approaching a diplomatic incident where you have an Irish citizen who's made a comment in the United States being arrested in the United Kingdom. Certainly if he was an American citizen, that arrest would breach his constitutional
I'd be very surprised.
This is crazy how far this law's gone.
I'd be very surprised if the Irish government do very much to stand up for Graham Lenihan, it must be said. Also, we have seen the clip many times on this station of Pascal Robinson Foster, who is one of the musicians, I use the term loosely, in Bob Villain, who shouted death, death to the IDF. Even in Somerset Police have given us a statement on this and says inquiries continue to be carried out in relation to comments made during a performance on stage at Glastonbury Festival on Saturday the 28th of June. So that's over 2 months ago. An investigative process has been put in place, which is being overseen and led by a senior detective to ensure all necessary inquiries are carried out. This has been recorded as a public order incident at this time. Our investigation team is considering all appropriate legislation, including relating to hate crimes. It is also important we have a full understanding of any legal precedents, which is a complex process, and we are working closely with the Crown Prosecution Service for early legal advice and with other UK police forces. We recognise the strength of public feeling around what took place, and we hope the ongoing inquiries provide reassurance and show the seriousness with which we are treating this investigation. We will continue to ensure the public and media are updated as our investigation process progresses. I'm not reassured. I'm not reassured that someone can go on a stage at Glastonbury, shout death, death to the IDF, thousands of people shout it back, and that person isn't arrested. Like, that is clear incitement, whereas Graham Lenihan's wasn't.
I mean, this is the most bizarre thing that they say they're using the time to gather evidence. Do you know what? They could just go back on the BBC iPlayer or contact the BBC and because they've probably taken it down now, belatedly, and say, give us the video. And it wasn't just the thousands of people in the crowd; it was the millions of people that it was being broadcast to. Look, we have this big debate. We have it here on Talk a Lot, which is the home of free speech. We have this debate about whether we have two-tier policing in this country. Let's not forget that following the appalling riots that were sparked by the murder of some children in Southport, the judicial system, quite correctly, was kicked into action, and we saw people going through the judicial system in a matter of days, in some cases hours, because it was regarded as being of such a serious nature that, justice had to be seen to be done quickly. This ongoing delay by Avon and Somerset Police, I mean, to me, it's just completely inexplicable and completely wrong.
Totally agree, Jack.
If nothing else, points to the fact that we do have this two-tier policing system in this country. And let me put something to you, just for the purposes of debate, because I'd be worried about the door knocking again. If I came on this show, obviously with your millions of listeners, Peter, and said, death, death to the liberal left, I mean, how long would it take?
Well, there are people holding signs saying punch a turf, kill a turf. Just on the free speech, just finally, Jake, and briefly, if you wouldn't mind, is Nigel Farage, your party leader, actually in a position to criticise about free speech, given that both Lee Anderson and many councillors in Nottinghamshire have refused to talk to the Nottingham Post newspaper? I mean, isn't that an erosion of free speech in that area by Reform UK?
Absolutely not. I mean, the Nottingham Post, they're not arresting the journalists. We're talking about people arresting comedians and people, what they said. They just said, we don't.
But can you say you're committed to free speech if you're not talking to your local paper?
We're not going to talk to you, but at the end of the day, the Nottingham Post
is free to still write whatever it wants and report whatever it feels appropriate. There's no, not talking to journalists. I quite like talking to some journalists. There's quite a lot of them I'd never bloody talk to if my life depended on it. Not talking to journalists isn't about eroding free speech. That's about free will. Journalists are still free to write disobliging things about me, you, Nigel Farage, Reform, and anyone else.
OK, Jake, thank you very much. That's Sir Jake Berry there, former chairman of the Conservative Party and a spokesman now for Reform UK. I'm going to talk about Lush in a minute. This is the cosmetics brand. They've closed all their stores and shut down their website in protest over what else? Palestine. Stay with us.
Coming on your show with increasing frequency because I realise it's much more effective than anything like Tinder or Hinge. I seem to be getting lots of DMs on the back of your promotion.
Let's just talk about this. Matt Vickers, ladies and gentlemen, let's just put this. He cares about the country. He's been very honest about the Tories. He's taken to going to IKEA with his parents at the weekend. The man is desperate for love, and every time he comes on the show, he gets DMs. Look at it this morning. If you notice, the shirt's undone to the waist. It's all going on, man. We're here to talk about politics, not your inability to get a girlfriend.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about the cosmetics chain Lush. You'll have seen them in many high streets of large towns and cities, and probably smelt them too, because they're very, very sort of fragrant bath bombs and things like that. I'm not going to talk about their products necessarily, but what they've done now is saying they're closing all of their stores and shutting down their website for a day in protest over what is happening in the Palestinian territories. Well, Jake Wallace-Simons is with me. He's an author and columnist. His new book is Never Again: How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself, which is out on the 2nd of October. Very good wishes for the publication of the book, Jake, within the next month. I know someone else actually who's got a book out in the next month. Anyway, Jake, what do you make of what Lush is doing here? I can't seem to recall them shutting all their stores and shutting down their website on the 8th of October 2023 after the horrendous attacks on Israelis. It's almost as if their protest is one-sided here.
Excellent point, Peter. I mean, my first thought was, my goodness, where am I going to get my bath bombs now? And my second thought was, I had a vision of the Israeli Prime Minister saying, what, Lush Cosmetics is shutting down for a whole day? Okay, pull the troops out, forget the war.
It's quite a good impression of Netanyahu, actually.
But it's, I mean, honestly, it's really quite funny. I mean, obviously, they're doing so because they want to make money. It reminded me of those corporations who use the Progress Pride flag in their merchandising, in their messaging, and make a great show of being woke. Really, because they're not for any other reason than a cynical attempt to curry favour with the public. Obviously, Lush are jumping on the Palestine bandwagon because they think that's where their particular clientele lie, and they're going to raise their image in their standing. But it's not really about the Middle East or any reality of what's going on over there. And it's quite depressing because they are actually, I'm sure unwittingly, but amplifying Hamas jihadi propaganda, which accuses Israel wrongly, totally wrongly, of starving Gaza. The idea that Gaza is in famine in itself has been exposed as false, even though the UN created that fabrication. Israel is letting aid in, but the UN is failing to distribute it and blaming Israel for it. And this is all favouring Hamas, putting the pressure on Israel rather than on the jihadi group to give up the hostages that it's holding underground. I mean, Lush is making itself a participant in that.
Well, absolutely. And you say it's unwitting, and it may well be unwitting, and maybe they don't realise this. But one of the things they're also going to do is relaunching a soap product called Watermelon Slice, which Lush says has proceeds going towards child mental health support in Palestine. And I mean, that's great if that is the case, but the point is a watermelon is the symbol of support for Hamas, that many people who abuse me online often have it in their Twitter bios, and it is a universally accepted symbol that you're supporting Hamas by having a watermelon, and that has become the symbol there. I mean, do they not know this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I use the word unwitting really to suggest that if you were to ask them, do you agree that it's a good idea to, kidnap, kill, mutilate civilians, they would probably say no. But in a way, the idiocy excuse only goes so far when their actions actually are lending support, magnification and credence in the public mind to Hamas. I mean, after all, that is why Hamas is trying to get civilians killed, to persuade people, idiots like Lush and other liberals around the West, to support them, the jihadi side, rather than the people that they killed, the democracy that they attacked. And that's been instrumental in turning public opinion against the democracy and for the jihad, the forces of jihad.
Jack, I just want to talk about Coldplay for a second while I have you. This is Chris Martin, the lead singer. He's been accused of dehumanising Israeli fans during a Coldplay concert at Wembley Stadium. Just let's have a look at this clip quickly.
Where did you come from today? From Israel. Okay, well, wow. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to say this. I'm very grateful that you're here as humans, and I'm treating you as equal humans on earth, regardless of where you come from or don't come from. Thank you for being here. We're grateful, and thank you for being loving and kind. And although it's controversial, maybe, I also want to welcome people in the audience from Palestine, because we have a belief that we're all equally human. And, yeah, thank you for being here.
What a patronising moron. I'd like to welcome you as humans, and I'm being so nice by just actually welcoming you, even though you come from that horrible part of the world called Israel. I mean, how patronising is that? And then he goes on to politicise it by mentioning Palestinians as well. Jack, honestly, he disappeared up his own rear end there.
Yeah, I mean, I find that clip really quite disturbing, because it just goes to show that Jews are not commonly now seen in many parts of society as humans. What was up for debate was whether Jews should be seen as humans or not. And that, from a Jewish point of view, obviously brings back some really disturbing memories from the recent past and back for thousands of years into history, where Jews have not been seen as humans, and as a result have been massacred in huge numbers and almost exterminated in living memory. And so for him to say, look, you might be Jewish, you might be Israeli, but I'm still going to take the step of seeing you as a human being.
I'm conveying humanity upon you because I am the great Chris Martin, and even though you're from that evil part of the world called Israel, I am telling you you're a human being. So patronising.
Exactly, and it's hugely disturbing. And then for him to say, "Oh, by the way, your enemies are welcome too." The whole thing, like you say, it was a sort of, you know, proto Church of England kind of liberal sermon he was trying to deliver. But all the while, the question mark lay over whether Jews do actually deserve to be seen as humans anymore.
Very quickly, Jake, still no arrests in Bob Villan. We're told by Avon and Somerset Police that we hope the ongoing inquiries provide reassurance and show the seriousness with which we are treating this investigation. I'm not reassured, yet they left Graham Linehan for his tweets.
Yeah, I mean, if Bob Villan would have tweeted, you know, death to, and then some liberal...
Trans people, death to trans people, if they'd said that. I don't want death to trans people, but if they tweeted that, they would have been lifted.
I think at least he would have had a non-crime hate incident against him, if not an actual crime.
Yeah. Jake, thank you very much as always. That's Jake Wallace-Simons, their author and columnist. His new book is called Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself is out on the 2nd of October. And very good wishes to any book that's coming out in the next month, no matter who is authoring that. Lots of people getting in touch, including Leslie says perhaps Angela Rayner didn't know what untenable meant, and what has working class not paying tax got to do with anything. Sir Jake Berry says, Tim, respect to you, sir. And Julia in Norfolk says the financial arrangements of Angela Rayner are not that complex. I would question why we have a Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary who lacks the intelligence to read and understand tax policies, even with professional advice. Serious concerns around her credibility. She should go, says Julia in Norfolk. And just on the death to the IDF from Bob Villan. Peter, when you were talking about Graham Linehan, says Steve, you promised to find out what's happening about the investigation by the very woke Avon and Somerset Police into the incitement. As I've said, yeah, we've got that statement, and I did read it out earlier, and they say, we hope the ongoing inquiries provide reassurance and show the seriousness with which we're treating this investigation. Inquiries continue, no arrests yet, 2 months on, and Avon and Somerset Police say it's a really complex matter. It's really not that complicated. It's really not that complicated. What you have is an absolute scumbag inciting a crowd, standing on a stage, it being televised by the BBC, who kept it going for another 40 minutes, saying death to the IDF. He wanted to kill Jews, and he said on a previous occasion that IDF soldiers should die. He lied by saying that he wasn't talking about the soldiers specifically, that he was talking about the army, the Israeli army more generally. That was a lie, because previously at another concert, at footage that has been unearthed there, he talked about IDF soldiers. And he'll do it again if you don't arrest Pascal Robinson Foster. It's really, really straightforward. That is incitement. What isn't incitement is Graham Linehan, who, and any thought of any action against him should be dropped immediately. We're going to take your thoughts on all of this, including Angela Rayner, next here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sorry, this is the best. This is an absolutely brilliant tweet I've got from Milo, who says about Sean earlier on. It goes, independent stamp duty advisor. He's been waiting all his life for this moment. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for that. You've made me smile. That is very, very funny. And yeah, Sean did a great job and explained the whole thing to us very well, as did Jake Berry, actually, I thought. And Fiona says, dear Talk, thank you to you and for Sean for the clarification of these matters. I do hope businesses, families and society are not affected by Angela's actions and we can all learn something for it. The Professor says, once again, your claims are misguided. Nigel Farage stands with patriots and your efforts to silence him and others reflect your fear of influence. However, allowing unchecked immigration of undocumented individuals of military age from unstable regions raises serious questions about national loyalty. Care to explain? I think he's asking Downing Street, but anyway, there we are. Steve says, on Lush, go woke, go broke. It might work for a beer brand, but for Lush it probably won't, as there are plenty of idiots who shop there for their bath bombs and chocolate masks and do not make a difference. And a number of people have pointed out to me that it's X, not Twitter. You must know this. I do know this, but a recent survey said that about 75% of people still call it Twitter. I'm going to call it Twitter because that is what I call it and that's what it is, and that's what the majority of people call it. Elaine in West Lothian says, Peter, what are these MPs on? Energy drinks already come under the Think 25 law. That's when they say, you know, are you over 25 or not? And kids under 16 are already banned from buying them in shops, so it must be the parents who are buying them for them. I worked in retail for a long time and trained in these things. So Elaine knows what she's talking about. We do know certainly that there are shops that don't sell them and won't sell them to under 16s. Lots of people getting in touch on Angela Rayner. Jeff's been in touch with a voice note.
Rayner's only prepared to pay back the £40,000 she owes in stamp duty because she's been found out. If she hadn't been found out, she'd still be lying back in a dinghy in a little bit of the channel, sucking on a vape pipe without a care in the world. But she's been collared.
Jeff, I mean, they always apologise once after being found out, don't they? Rich has been in touch on this as well.
I've just heard Keir Starmer standing up saying he is very proud to work and stand alongside Angela Rayner because she's building 1.5 million homes. Unfortunately, the Labour Party are buying up most of them for themselves.
Rich, thank you. The good news is that Angela Rayner isn't going to buy all of them herself, and she's only going to have 3 homes, not 1.5 million. So I can put your mind to rest on that one. Rob's been in touch.
Regarding Angela No Brainer, Free Pads Rayner, she won't resign because she's just bought a new house. She's got to pay for it somehow because she can't go back to her working class roots and get anything from that, can she? So, you know, there's no chance she's going to resign. If you go into politics, yeah, and you come out richer than when you went in, you're corrupt. That's it, mate.
I think I disagree with that, Rob, in terms of being richer when you came in. But politicians do earn an awful lot of money. There's no doubt about that. Julie in Norfolk has been in touch, 0344 499 1000. Julie, thanks for your call. What would you like to say about Angela Rayner?
Oh, hello. Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
Hello. I am the mother of a severely disabled child with cerebral palsy and autism, adult child. So I'm not sympathetic to the way that she's playing the cards here.
Well, you've got to play by the rules like everybody else, despite the fact that you have, your hands full there.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I've spoken to you before because my other son is a social worker. But what people need to look at is her what she's claiming in expenses, in her parliamentary expenses, because she's now said that her main residence is in Manchester, Greater Manchester. Who's paying the council taxes? We've got an ex-husband living in there. Is he sharing the cost?
I think HMRC will be looking into every single bit of this. I think it's going to take a while for Angela Rayner as well, and we're not going to get answers quickly on this, Julie, but the political pressure will continue. What do you think? I mean, do you think she should resign?
Oh, absolutely. The hypocrisy of her, when you listen to her previous things on X, Twitter, as I call it, like you, when you listen to her rhetoric against other parties who MPs have allegedly done wrong, and there she is playing, I just feel she's now playing the victim. I've got this severely disabled child. Well, there are many mothers in this country who have disabled children, and many mothers who have disabled children happen to be single parents because marriages break down. So we've all gone, like I have, we've all gone through the divorce, we've all had to sort out our finances and support your disabled child, and now she wants me to feel sorry for her.
It reminds me slightly, Julie, first of all, I think everything you're saying is absolutely correct. It slightly reminds me, I don't know if you remember the flats scandal where Cherie Blair, who was, who is Tony Blair.
Children, I do.
Yeah, and she said, oh, well, you know, sometimes you drop the ball and, you know, I have so many balls in the air and so on. I think, hold on a second here. You are someone who is, both Cherie Blair and Angela Rayner, very senior in their field. Cherie Blair as a barrister and part-time judge, and also with all the resources of politics behind you, leadership of a party, staff, you know, she has someone who advised her in her clothes. Angela Rayner has special advisors, she has parliamentary staff, she has a civil service with lots of people. She earns a lot more money than the average wage. In fact, cabinet ministers earn somewhere in the region of £150,000 a year, which is, you know, more than 4 times the average wage in this country. I just think when you're falling back on excuses such as I'm working class, well, first of all, I think she's probably now middle class, but anyway, that's by the by. When she's falling back on those excuses, oh, it's all a bit complicated, and oh, I was divorced and I have a disabled. I mean, it just sounds like excuses, and you're someone, Julie, who's been through some of the things that Angela Rayner's been through, and you're not convinced.
You know, it's quite interesting. I've got neighbours who are elderly, and they're going to lose their home because they've got to pay for their spouse's social care. And by setting up this trust, what she has cleverly done is that her son will have no assets, so the state will have to support. And I don't begrudge that. You know, so that's the socialism element of it. But she's willfully avoided that element that many pensioners who have lived, worked hard, and are going to lose their family home to pay for their spouse's support. Her son will stay in that home. We will have to financially, I don't begrudge it, we will have to financially support him, which is not wrong, but it's a very clever tax manoeuvre and a beneficial mover. She understands, I read law, she understands the Care Act of 2014, and I was one of the architects of it, and I sat with David Cameron's government writing that, and I find it incredulous that she now wants to plead, poor me, poor me, poor me. No, Angela, you had, I want to know who, I want to know who was the advisor that said you could do this in the first place.
Well, exactly. Julie, you make some,
Yeah, what information did she give them? Because if you give them rubbish, you'll get rubbish back. And who is the tax counsellor? Oh, barrister, really, that's what we should say. Who's now giving them this new advice? Who's funding it?
Well, all of that has to come out. There's so many questions, as Jake Berry actually said earlier on. He thinks that there are more questions than answers that have been raised by this. Really good points, Julie. And listen, I wish you well with the challenges in your life and your child there. I really wish you well because you're clearly doing a great job. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch about this. Leslie says, if Rayner goes, hopefully her Islamophobia bill will go too. Another person says, so Starmer is proud to have Rayner as his deputy and has confidence in her. So Starmer endorses tax dodging. Unbelievable. Obviously, there's no suggestion Angela Rayner has done anything illegal, but she's certainly avoided tax. There's no doubt about that. Stephen Cambridge says, Starmer sissy fit at PMQs has probably put reforms polling up another point. Stephen Leeds wants to give us his thoughts on digital ID. This is something we talked to Lord West about a bit earlier on, former Security Minister. Steve's given us a ring. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter.
Hi there.
Just a quick thing on this ID card. When I was 16, I got a national insurance card. I've actually still got it, which has your national insurance number on, and that number is the most important piece of information that you have across the country.
Yeah.
It tells the government you have access to government services across the board. Yeah. So rather than the government trying to create a horse by committing end up with a camel, why don't we just issue an NHS card when you're 16 with your photo, your address, your date of birth, and your NHS number? If all you need is an identity card, that's all the information you need. Because we know that when the government gets involved in IT systems, it gets so expensive and so complicated, and it doesn't work If what you want is an ID card, then just make it an ID card. The driving licence systems work. We have a photo, you have a card. It's not on digital, it's not on your phone, it's a card. They send you in the post. It's updated every 10 years. It works.
Yeah. Well,
let's just keep it simple, because when you're 18, Peter, every kid I know that's 18 has to go out and buy an ID.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
To go to the pub.
And actually, that would.
Why don't we just give them a card?
Well, that would help in that way, Steve. I think that's a good idea, and thank you for it. Thanks to the person who's texting me to say anything promoted by Blair is to be avoided like the plague. Admiral Lord West is very sensible, says Glyn. Just a pity he accepted office under Brown. Utterly undermines his credibility. Rachel says, I'll go to prison before I carry an ID card. Dan says, this ID card business is ridiculous. The chap you had on saying the illegals coming over wouldn't be able to do anything, but what would stop the government just giving them an ID card when they arrive, which allows them everything they're already getting? Once again, it would be a case of the locals not being allowed to have the same. It's not the ID, it's the permissions given by the government. One more from Adrian, who says, regarding Starmer rushing through a review of ID cards, how about instead of thinking about a solution to deal with a failed asylum policy, why not instead rush through setting up the rape gang inquiry? We learned yesterday that unsurprisingly nothing has been done. With regard to ID cards, I'd be interested to hear how it is to be policed. I absolutely guarantee it will be a fine if you don't have one as a money-making exercise. How else is this to be paid for? That's Adrian in Horsham there. Quite a few people as well, giving us their thoughts over the last couple of hours about money and cash. This is Weatherspoons that are saying that you can't you can't use a £20 or £50 note in their pubs in England anymore. David's been in touch on this. He sent me a voice note. Let's hear what David has to say.
It's been long practice in our area for shops not to accept Scottish pound notes. One of the reasons being that when you try to give it back to an ordinary customer from this area, they're reluctant to accept it because other shops won't accept them. So yeah, it's been going on for quite a long time, and I certainly wouldn't take one because they're difficult to get rid of. Great show. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. And Matthew says, I have a lot of family in Scotland. The only time I use cash is birthday, Christmas. Plenty of shops don't accept them here. Even Top Man didn't accept them, but would accept euros as payment instead. Make it make sense, says Matthew in Sunderland. I want to thank Alicia in Chelmsford, who sent me a message. Who says, can you imagine how different things could have been for us Jews if all presenters were sensible like you and invited guests such as Jake to share the truth? The attacks against Jews are off the scale, and much of the blame has to go to media outlets who have lost their moral compass. Well, thank you, Alicia, for that. I really appreciate that. I also want to say a big hello to Sam, who is apparently a fan of the show, and also Brian Sheeran, who is a Belfast taxi driver who often listens to the programme. So, Brian, thank you for listening to the show. I know that you were in touch with my brother recently and said that you enjoyed listening to me in your taxi as you ferry people around Belfast. We're going to talk about the sport in just a second. Stay with us.
In my constituency of Runcorn, I have 2 people that this happened to over ill-advised tweets, but nothing terrible, who, again, one of them has lost his partner, his girlfriend, lost his job, you know, and it goes on and on. The impact on people's lives of this ridiculous policing of our speech, it has now got to the point where, you know, it's actually quite frightening. Reform's policy, of course, is to repeal this ridiculous online Safety Act.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Heather, who says politicians think more about themselves than the constituencies they represent. When they get voted in, they should sacrifice themselves to serve their duties to the citizens of these areas. Jim in Manchester says, great show, yes, she should resign, but let's think a bit outside the box. Firstly, who or how did this information leak out? And secondly, if she resigned, who would step in and who would decide who would step in? Well, if she resigned, Keir Starmer would decide who the new Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister would be. But also, I think it's complicated by the fact that Angela Rayner is Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and that is something that is voted for by the members of the Labour Party. It's not within Keir Starmer's gift. And actually, when Harriet Harman was Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, it was always said that, you know, Gordon Brown didn't want her anywhere in his cabinet, but he had to because she was Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and that may have to be run again. That would be really problematic with the political conferences coming up as well. But let's leave politics just for a minute and talk about sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Well, Mike Ansted's with me today. Mike is the sport head of content at The Sun. Hi, Mike.
How are you doing, Peter?
Very well, thanks. Big developments today in the betting case against West Ham's Lucas Paqueta. Can you bring us up to date?
Yeah, this is a really interesting case. So Lucas Paqueta, West Ham's Brazilian superstar, recently got off these charges that he'd been involved in a betting scandal within football. This surrounded 4 yellow cards he got during 2022-2023. Thrown out, and then since an independent commission that's looked into this case has found that there's no evidence from the FA to back up what they call simply suspicions. So the case here is essentially you've just gone on what is looking like suspicious betting markets, which is fine, but you've actually then not backed it up with any evidence. So Paqueta, whose career has really stalled over the last 18 months. Of course, yeah. You can't blame him. Very close to joining Manchester City. Pep Guardiola wanted to sign him. His form's fallen off a cliff. He's really suffered about it. Talked about a living nightmare. He's been left devastated over it. So yeah, the FA are really left us, you know, facing a lot of questions over this and how they leapt from what is suspicions to actually then charging this guy on multiple offences. I mean, this was 253 bets, totaling £47,000, could have won 167,000 profit for these people. Paqueta's left trying to pick up the piece of career. Obviously, there's an argument he could go and then make a case for, well, you know, I lost my move.
Loss of earnings. Loss of earnings. Which would be a lot more expensive than any of those bets.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, very interesting case, and the FA left with a lot of answers.
Let's talk about the new Manchester City goalkeeper, Gianluigi Donnarumma. He has said that he might need some more practice with her tactics. Are we likely to see the Italian Euros winner start when the Premier League returns?
So this is a really interesting signing from Pep Guardiola. So Pep Guardiola for the last 5 or 6 years has been able to rely on Ederson, one of the Premier League's greatest goalkeepers. And one of Ederson's defining aspects is the fact that he's as good on the ball as a lot of Premier League outfield players. So Manchester City play very, very quick balls out the back, and he's very comfortable doing it. Donnarumma, who's an Italian goalkeeper, been thrown out by PSG, who no longer want him. He's a great shot stopper, but not very good with his feet. and there's people wondering his first game, which could be in the Manchester derby, is he going to be found out quite quickly with the way Pep Guardiola plays, and he's not going to change from that. So he's admitted today, I need to improve fast. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Pep can get him up to speed that quickly.
Ruben Loftus-Cheek, he's back in the England squad and spoke to the media. What did he have to say?
So Ruben Loftus-Cheek is really interesting. So he hasn't had an England cap in 7 years. That's a really long gap for any player to be absent from the squad. He played under Tuchel at Chelsea. He played under a lot of other managers at Chelsea, but Tuchel was the one he had the most appearances under. But he was laughing today that it was one of his first meetings with Tuchel at Chelsea. He turned around and said to Loftus-Cheek, who's a central midfielder, I want you to play right wing back. Loftus-Cheek said he openly laughed in Tuchel's face, but he was willing to do it, impressed him, and Tuchel's clearly kept in the back of his mind. So even though Loftus-Cheek's been over at AC Milan for the past few seasons, he's been called up for this squad. And look, we're only less than a year out from the World Cup. Here's your chance to prove whether you should be part of that squad going to America next summer.
Worked out quite well for him. And a former England striker feels as if he has been forgotten about. Tell us about this.
I think it's really interesting. An interview come out this afternoon with Michael Owen. And look, Michael Owen is Mr. Marmite, I think it's fair to say. Some people like him, some people find him a bit of an oddball. But what's undeniable is he achieved an incredible amount of success during the early years of his career. As he points out, 2 golden boots by the age of 18, you know, Premier League top goal scorer. He won the Ballon d'Or by the age of 22, which not many Englishmen or British players can claim to do. He's making the point that actually his career suffered because of injuries, and then once he was at Real Madrid, then Newcastle, Manchester United, Stoke, he became essentially a little bit of a laughing stock because he'd peaked so early in his career.
Yeah.
But actually he's described it in his own words as agony, that a lot of the younger fans now, perhaps people on social media, have no real understanding of how good he was in the game. So it's quite an admission.
Do you think he suffered because of his sort of boring monotone and the fact that he was quite a dull personality?
I don't know whether having boring monotone stopped whether decided whether he could put the ball in the back of the net.
No.
He certainly is an.
But he didn't have the personality of some players, and that sort of helps your longevity as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think that's part of the reason that people struggle to warm to him. Really, I think he's quite dull. He's quite monotone. There's not much personality going on there, and also you can't pin him down to a club. Is he Liverpool's Michael Owen? Well, they didn't really like him as he went out at Real Madrid. Real Madrid got rid of him quite quickly. Man United fans got no interest in him because he wasn't very good by then, and Newcastle fans don't really like him either. So he's quite difficult to pin down.
Do you feel sorry for him?
No, I don't, because he's got millions and millions in the bank. But it's quite interesting. A lot of people would just turn around and say, "I don't care." He's actually saying it's caused, it's
caused him a bit of anguish.
It's a good debate, I think.
Poor old Michael Owen, and perhaps he can console himself with his huge bank balance. Listen, thank you very much indeed, Mike Anstead, there, sports head of content at The Sun. Is there a head of discontent?
We're looking to employ one, yeah.
Yeah, well, he's the head of content anyway. I'm sure all your employers are completely content with your brilliant management. Mike, and knowledge of sport as well. Thank you for that. Loads to discuss. We'll talk to Graham Stewart, the Conservative MP, about all the stories of the day. Let me know if you think Angela Rayner should resign. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it's Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Loads to talk about today. Angela Rayner is on the ropes. Will the Deputy Prime Minister resign because she's been caught out not paying enough stamp duty? It's not illegal, but she certainly hasn't done what many people think she should. We'll talk to Graham Stewart MP, the Conservative MP for Beverley and Holderness, in just a second. We'll also talk about half of criminals could possibly avoid jail under Starmer's sentencing shake-up. We'll take a peek inside the Sun, and we'll take as many of your calls, texts and tweets as we can, as well as voice notes. Get your call in 0344 499 1000. Would love to hear what you think about Angela Rayner and anything else you want to discuss this evening, whether it's digital IDs or banknotes as well. Weatherspoon says that you can't spend Scottish banknotes in English pubs if they're a 20 or 50 pound note. It'd be quite nice to have a few 50 pound notes in any currency really, in any sterling or elsewhere. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Alex Phillips is coming up at 7 o'clock. Loads to discuss with her as well. But in the meantime, let's just look back at the Sky News interview the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner gave earlier today, admitting she may have underpaid tax.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people. But because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
But this is what Angela Rayner said 2 years ago when the former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi had similar tax issues. This is how she attacked him.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services, and we know the state they're in. So the former Chancellor, when he was Chancellor last summer, made it clear at the time when he was questioned that he pays all his taxes and that he's done everything appropriately, and was threatening legal letters to anyone that questioned him. Now it emerged actually that that's not true, and that there was a HMRC investigation and that he's had to pay penalties for that. I think that makes his position untenable.
Well, bringing us back to 2025, Angela Rayner doesn't think that her position is untenable, and neither does her boss, the Prime Minister, who said this at Prime Minister's Questions in the House of Commons today.
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do. But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country.
But this was the view of the independent stamp duty expert Sean Randall a bit earlier on in this programme.
So the focus then should be on Angela in trying to find out why she didn't tell that firm what happened in relation to her disposal of Ashton. And, you know, look, the stamp duty rules are complicated. The particular rule that we're talking about, the one that's hurt Angela in question, it's a deeming rule. It's an anti-avoidance rule, ironically. It's pretty obscure. It wouldn't be at the front of mind of any high street conveyancer if a high street conveyancer was used. But nevertheless, relying on legal advice in isolation isn't normally a defence to a penalty for carelessness.
Sean Randall there, an independent stamp duty expert, and Mark in Lancashire says being incorrectly advised is no more a defence in a tax fraud case than claiming ignorance of the law is in a criminal case. We are all 100% liable for our tax declarations and affairs. HMRC are merciless in pursuing private citizens for underpaid tax, including fines and interest. Well, Mark, that's absolutely true, and I changed the way I was paid. It wasn't my choice, but it changed the way I was paid when I moved from being political editor presenter of this station full-time presenter. And I mean, HMRC couldn't quite cope with that and launched a 1-year investigation into me. And at the end of that 1-year investigation, calculated that I owed about £200, which presumably wouldn't even pay a tax inspector for 1 day. And it took a year to go through that. It's ludicrous. But from Angela Rayner's perspective, she's under pressure financially. She's under pressure in terms of what she's done. She may owe £40,000. She's also under pressure politically as well. Let's talk about that with Graham Stewart MP. He's the Conservative MP for Beverley and Holderness. Graham, good evening.
Good evening, Peter.
Should Angela Rayner resign?
Well, I think she should, shouldn't she? She spent seemingly every day and every tweet calling for Conservatives to resign over far less egregious behaviour than this. She was part of a government that promised to be whiter than white, that was going to be transparent. Do you remember that? And there were going to be higher standards. Now we've got a Prime Minister who says he's proud to sit beside a woman who has admitted that she didn't pay tens of thousands of pounds of tax when she purchased a home. I mean, we all know what she would have said and what the Prime Minister would have said if it had been a Conservative a year and a bit ago. So how can she possibly remain? She set the standard. She has to live up to it, and that's what people expect.
This is avoidance rather than evasion, though. There's no suggestion she's done anything illegal per se, so should she resign for that? It's the stench of this. This smells bad. It doesn't pass the smell test. But has she done anything wrong that you can see?
Peter, she's the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She's in charge of housing. She's part of a team which, by all accounts, is planning to hit people with even higher taxes, from council tax to various other threatened forms of tax. She's personally talked about wanting to, hit so many people in so many ways for additional tax, and she gave that emotional speech which you quoted about how important it was to protect the taxpayer from people avoiding tax. She's done all that, and then she's failed herself. She's the Deputy Prime Minister of the country, and as your viewers or whoever it was said, you're responsible. When you're a minister, you're advised. Lots of advice, but when I was a minister, I owned the decision. Doesn't matter what advice I got. I owned it. It's my job to get to the bottom of it, and my job to take responsibility for it. And it seems like they're incapable of taking responsibility for things. I mean, we have a business secretary, who claimed to be a solicitor. I mean, that's not like claiming to be a broadcaster or claiming even to be a politician. It's actually against the law to claim to be a solicitor, and he carries on. I'm quite clear that she ought to go. I think my constituents are angry. I'm angry. It's just the hypocrisy of it. People hate it.
You see, your attack
the biggest champion of fighting for this stuff and against people doing anything wrong, and you're saying they've got to recognise the height of their position, their status. They've got to be held to the highest possible account. That's what leadership's all about, and that's all the language that she came out with for years. And now, when the boot's on the other foot, apparently the rules don't apply. Apparently she's working class.
Graham,
to working class people up and down this country to suggest there's something from that their background excuses them from following the law and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and accepting responsibility. Okay. That's why people are so cross, because they go to endless lengths to make sure they pay all their taxes and go without. And here she is coming out suggesting that it doesn't apply to her, and, floating around in a boat, vaping away in a dinghy. She's very welcome to have a nice holiday, but doing so while tens of thousands of pounds in her pocket, which it turns out, and she has now admitted, shouldn't have been there.
Graham, your attack on Angela Rayner in the last, let's say, 2.5, 3 minutes, is a heck of a lot more powerful, contains far more facts, contains far more passion than anything we heard from Kemi Badenoch today at Prime Minister's Questions. Dan Hodges, the Mail on Sunday columnist, is merciless in his criticism. He has tweeted, Kemi Badenoch hasn't just missed an open goal, she's missed the goal, she's punched her manager, she's then stormed into the stands on the cost of the owner, she's then charged out into the street, torched the team bus, her kit, and set light to the entire stadium. Where was Kemi Badenoch today at PMQs when she could have gone in her 6 questions time and time again on Angela Rayner and provided some of the opposition to Labour that is being cried out for? Because your party is nowhere at the moment.
Well, you know, I thought Kemi was very effective at
really?
And quite rightly focused on the economy. It's underneath all this, but the boats which upsets us, this kind of rank hypocrisy and the disorganisation with the government, that upsets us. But the fundamentals, Peter, and you know this, things that matter to families in the long term is getting the economy right, and that's where she has... But they care about their
you're right, Graham, but they care about their politicians as well. I mean, Zach Polanski, who's the leader of the 7th largest party in Britain, he's become leader of the Green Party, and that is a news event in itself. But he's created far more headlines than your party has. What you've said in the last few minutes is far more powerful than anything Kemi Badenoch said at Prime Minister's Questions.
Well, this thing landed just before Prime Minister's Questions came out, so whether that was done deliberately or not, I can't say, but it came out just beforehand. And, you know, I don't claim to be an expert, Peter, but I have tried to make sure I've looked into this sufficiently. I've watched her full interview and the like. Kemi didn't have that opportunity. And when you are the leader of the opposition, your first job is to be responsible. And it's not just to get headlines. When you're a far left leader of the Green Party, of course you don't care.
But the point of Prime Minister's Questions, but Graham, the point of Prime Minister's Questions is that it is the one time in the week where the media is going to look at what you say, it's going to evaluate it, you can make headlines from it. Is Kemi Badenoch out of her depth?
Oh, absolutely not. No, she's been landing punches week in, week out, but it's a long, hard, thankless task. You know that. Once you've been thrown out as we were, it's very hard to get attention. And the idea, the solution is to be throwing Kemi overboard, absolutely not. What we've got to do is be united, focused, and that's what I saw today from her. She could have gone off at risk of being half-cock on the Angela story because she hadn't had time to look at it properly, but
there's plenty of information.
And she, you know, you've seen her performance. She's been scoring goal after goal.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but let's talk about something else, Graham, which is about free speech in this country and how under threat it is. Something else Kemi Badenoch could have made more of, I think, at Prime Minister's Questions. This is what Nigel Farage has been saying in America this afternoon, morning in America.
Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona, and months later he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. He was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on roll-out effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. Don't allow piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation.
Can I just point out, just before I go back to Graham, that we were reporting this yesterday from 4 o'clock. We spent a lot of the show on Talk Drive yesterday about it. I now, for the first time, have seen the BBC actually reporting this story, which is on the front page of many, many newspapers this morning. Graham, what do you make of Mr Farage's remarks, and do you believe, as he does, that free speech is under serious threat in this country?
Well, free speech is so precious that any threat to it has to be taken seriously. And what did Nigel say? Worrying, concerning and shocking. you can't disagree with any of that, can you? For Graham Linehan to be arrested in that manner, who knows? Maybe there's more facts to come out, but I think they would have come out by now.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the Prime Minister's official spokesman has criticised this. Wes Streeting has criticised this. The Health Secretary, the Shadow Scottish Secretary yesterday. I mean, do you think that Graham Linehan, on the evidence that's in the public domain at the moment, has broken the law?
I certainly hope not, because from what I understand of it, I don't think that he can possibly be considered to do so. If he has, then we need to change the law. That's the basic thing. The Prime Minister was asked today by a Conservative colleague of mine, will you review this if the law needs to be changed? Pretty easy thing for a man who's condemned Linehan's arrest. As you say, 5 armed police officers. I mean, you would have thought in the confines of Heathrow, you need 1 unarmed officer who would be perfectly capable of arresting someone. So what's that show of force tell you as well? It's just awful.
In fairness, those officers are armed anyway. But I do agree with you, Graham, that there's a really pernicious aspect to all of this. And I just wonder what you would want the law to be. I mean, this is apparently about incitement. And I mean, incitement is something that can happen and people can be arrested for, but whether Twitter and other social media should be policed in such a way is a big issue, because so many people, we talk about free speech. I've received, I'm sure you as a practicing politician, former minister, have received far worse than what Graham Linehan put on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a new world now. I mean, it used to be we'd be down the pub and there'd be a loud mouth who might say something awful, racist, violent, all the rest of it. And it's not exactly unheard of in a pub, is it? But it was in the pub, and hopefully people would speak up and put them down and tell them to behave properly, and that would be the end of it. But now we're in a place where everything's suddenly amplified, carried all over the world by social media. And so the fairest thing, the kindest thing I could say for the law as it's currently being applied is it's struggling to catch up.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And Nigel Farage, in this case, is absolutely right to say that we cannot stand by and allow our freedom of speech to be eroded. We need to find ways of giving the police more specific, if that's a requirement, more specific guidance, because now there is just so many messages from so many people across so many channels, and somebody's interpretation of it is, is that an incitement to violence? If it is, then I have to go and investigate. Well, we've got to find a way through this that's practical, which is why, as I say, the Prime Minister was asked today, will you conduct a review? And he couldn't, as ever. He's so charmless, isn't he? It's frightening how charmless he is. Can he just smile and go, of course, let's I can't
let's have a look into it.
I can't tell you all the details today, but the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. Let's look into this, because we owe it to the police as well as to our long tradition of freedom.
And Sir Mark Rowley,
and our international reputation to get this right. We owe it to the head of the Metropolitan Police.
Who called for the law to be who called for the law to be clarified or changed. Graham, thank you. Graham Stewart MP there, Conservative for Beverley and Holderness. Appreciate you joining me this evening. Thank you to Gary, who says if Angela Rayner got bad initial legal advice regarding the liability for stamp duty on the purchase of her Brighton property, then she, I think it's Hove, but they're pretty close to one another, then she has a duty to report the individual or the company that provided that poor legal advice to the appropriate professional body, not least as a warning to the rest of us not to use them. Now, if she doesn't do that, then you have to wonder whether that bad legal advice ever really existed, or whether it was even perhaps the correct legal advice but was based on incorrect facts supplied by Rayner. Curtis from Lingfield has also been in touch and says, hi Peter, I think Rayner needs to be exterminated from her post as Deputy Prime Minister. Curtis, sorry, you know I hate puns. Stay with us here on Talk.
I do not think that, every single nanny state issue is an issue with children. I mean, I definitely think that children should be restricted from accessing certain things. For example, I think it's right that under 18s cannot buy cigarettes. Even though they're able to access it, I do think that having a legal age limit is right when it comes to those products. But when it comes to the energy drinks industry, what they have done is the government is looking at targeting one industry when it makes absolutely no sense in terms of the actual harm that it has. I mean, children, about 10% of the caffeine that they're drinking is from energy drinks, right?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch, including Andy in Alicante, who says, Peter, don't forget Rayner has form. Last year she blamed bad advice for doing something wrong surrounding her council house she'd bought. She refused to publish that advice. She's not very good at selecting experts, is she? Ellie in Staffordshire says, it's my opinion that the police at this stage are nothing but bullies. Heavy-handed policing. They're not policing by consent, without fear or favour. They're shameful, says Ellie in Staffordshire. Jane says, what happens if people don't want digital ID? Will it be excluded from society? Well, there's a lot of people, especially not just older people, but some younger people as well. There's some old people who are brilliant at technology, the Silver Surfers and all the rest of them. There's one member of my family I can think of who's very good at technology and apps, and as good as I am probably. And then there's another member of my family I can think of actually who just isn't, and just doesn't, still uses a checkbook and, doesn't use online banking and all that kind of stuff, and nor should that person have to do that. And I do wonder about people being sort of left behind by the digital side of things. So Jane has a very, very good point there as well. Susan also says, how will ID cards work? It's digital ID, it's slightly different with illegal immigrants if nobody knows who they are after they've thrown their passports into the sea. And Hills in southwest Wales says digital ID, no. Presumably Hills is short for Hillary rather than the hills themselves, the Welsh valleys, and Hills actually texting in, although that would be quite interesting. Now then, half of criminals could avoid jail under Starmer's sentencing shake-up. This is news that there are many changes to how sentencing policy works in this country, and up to half of criminals could avoid jail, including burglars, shoplifters and thieves, instead facing tougher community sentences under plans to place judges and magistrates under a new legal presumption against jailing anyone for less than a year. This is the idea of short sentences. What's the point of a short sentence? They'll, if you're sentenced for a year, you'll maybe serve 6 months or even less. Are you actually punished for that? But then, of course, the arguments over the victims of crime saying, well, we actually want someone banged up for this. Vanessa Frick is a Justice Advisor to Reform UK and a former prison governor herself. Vanessa, good evening.
Good evening, Peter. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Short sentences, do they work?
No, they don't, unfortunately. The statistics are there, Peter. I think it's something like 26% of prisoners who have 12 months or less reoffend. And it's much less for longer sentences because in all fairness, the prisoner has time to work with them. So, I understand the reasoning. What I am concerned about is that, by scrapping the 12-month sentence, we are going to release an awful lot of criminals back into our communities under the pretext that they're going to be closely monitored by GPS systems. No football matches, no pubs, which sounds great. But actually, Serco haven't got the best record in the world of monitoring prisoners just on the electronic tags. So to me, it just seems to me that this government is doing everything it possibly can to stop people going to prison. But that's all very well, but actually you have to put the infrastructure in, and I don't believe that that's happened.
There's also the point that if you're a victim of crime, you'll often, you really want someone to serve their time and to do some time in prison. I've covered magistrates' courts as a journalist, and there are often people who have many dozens of convictions, maybe even hundreds of convictions. We've read stories about shoplifters, for example, who have, many many, many convictions, and they still haven't gone to prison. Everything is tried, especially with something that's not violent crime, everything is tried to keep that person out of prison. These forms of community sentences, community service, as it used to be called, restrictions, fines, and often when someone's sent to prison for I'm not talking about murderers here, I'm talking about more lower level offences, it's often the end of a road. So that road is now even longer. So for victims of crime, there will be at least some frustration if this comes to fruition.
Yeah, and I fully empathise with victims who are not getting the justice that they deserve. You know, part of prison is to protect the public. It's also retribution, and it's also rehabilitation. And this seems to me to be cutting out the retribution for victims of crime. And it's not something that I particularly agree with. I think that, you know, we could do much better by looking at the reasons for the crime. You know, many are drug addicts, alcoholics, mental health issues, and we don't ever seem to address those.
Were you someone who was, when you were a prison governor, did you often see people and you thought, right, I can see exactly why you're in prison. It's to do with, I'm not excusing anything, I'm not excusing anything, but, you know, if the drug addiction had been sorted out, if the alcoholism had been sorted out, if, you know, you hadn't had, you know, crap parents who didn't look after you and didn't instill some discipline, you could have avoided jail because you wouldn't have done the things that would have landed you there. I'm not being a bleeding heart liberal, I'm not saying these people aren't guilty. What I'm saying is that if you remove those causes or get in early and try to shape people's lives, actually that's the way to sort this.
Of course it is, and of course I did. There were many people in prison who you thought, look, if you'd have sorted out your drug habit or your alcoholism or your mental health issues, you wouldn't be here in the first place. And that is the issue. It's all very well telling people, well, you can't go here, you can't go there, and you can't go wherever. But actually, if you're not addressing the causes of that crime in the first place, and I'm not talking about organised crime, I'm not talking about high-level crime, I'm talking about the everyday low-level crime, those that have social and economic impacts upon them. And that is the people, to me, that need the most help, not the high-level crime, not the organised crime, murderers, rapists, etc.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting. I know you've been talking to Reform UK about justice as well. I mean, what I always said when I was an advisor at the MOJ for the Conservatives previously was there is actually an argument to be made, because if you look at the huge amount of money it costs to put someone in prison, I think it's £54,000 on average. Yep. Goes up, you know, maybe 3-4 times that if you put someone in a young offenders institution with all of the cost of that. Well, actually, do you want that person to contribute to society? Do you want them to be rehabilitated? Because unless you're one of the 75 people who is, you know, the Rose Wests and the Wayne's cousins on a whole life tariff, you're going to get out at some stage. So there's got to be some conversation, I think, on the right rather than on the left. I think there's a big conversation to be had about rehabilitation and what our prisons are actually for. There'll be a lot of people who say just bang people up and forget about them. That's okay as far as it goes, but actually if those people are going to get out, as most people are, what do we want them to actually be?
Well, I know from my own experience, you know, if prisoners are coming out and back into my community, I don't want them to come and to cause crime. I want them to contribute to the society that I'm living in. And I would hope that that was what most people wanted. But I don't think that we've got it right. And I'm not sure that these new things, and particularly, you know, about foreign national criminals that are going to be convicted and deported straight out, what justice does that give to the victims? It gives none whatsoever.
Well, that's a whole other debate, and I think we agree on that as well. Vanessa, thank you. That's Vanessa Freck there, who is a former prison governor, also Justice Advisor to Reform UK. Paul is in Bangor and says, and has been in touch on digital IDs. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. Bangor in Wales, I presume?
No, Bangor, Northern Ireland.
Bangor, Northern Ireland. Great stuff. County Down, North Down, lovely. Tell me your thoughts, Paul.
Well, it's about digital ID. If I'm stopped on the street by the police, I do not have a mobile phone, I do not use computers, I do not have credit cards, I do not use store cards, I have no digital footprint. How do I show a digital ID?
It's a very good point, and actually a lot of people will be excluded from that. And it's not just about showing a digital ID, it's about accessing services as well.
Right. But how can I access services if I don't have the digital ID to access it?
That's the point I'm making. I'm supporting your argument, and I do think that is a big risk. And there's a lot of, I wonder if you agree with me on this, that the government and a lot of people thinking about this are just discounting quite a number of people who don't want to have a digital ID. They don't want to use, I give the example of a member of my family who still uses a checkbook, doesn't use online banking at all.
I heard you saying that, and that brought me back to during COVID. The amount of computers and mobile phones that the government had to supply to children who didn't have access to internet and everything else. This is my wife's mobile phone. I don't have a mobile phone. I don't use it.
What do people say to you, Paul, when you? How do people react to you when you say you don't have a mobile phone? Do they question it? What do they say?
Do you know what most of them say? I wish I could do without mine.
Yeah.
And I says, well, have you ever tried? And they just smile at you.
Although you are using your wife's mobile phone to ring me now, so
yes, I am.
You do have access to one, you just don't use it yourself.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I have. This is my wife's mobile phone that I use.
And that's been a deliberate decision.
I don't want one.
And why have you decided to stay not quite off grid, but almost off grid with these? Has that been a very conscious decision over the years?
Well, yes and no. I do not trust computers at all. I do know how to use them, but I choose not to. They're very, very dangerous, Peter.
And
I do not trust them.
Do you work, or are you retired, or I just wonder?
I'm retired.
Okay,
I'm retired.
And in your work previously, did you use computers there?
I had to use computers at work, and I can see what they can do, and I think it is a terrible infringement on your liberty. That people can go in and see what you're doing, not against the law, but they can still monitor it, and I just don't want it at all.
What would you say to people who give up a lot of information willingly, Paul? There are loads of people who tell all sorts of companies, they tell them all sorts of information about themselves. Those companies can sell that information, use it for marketing purposes. You know, I remember a senior person at Facebook who I know was telling me that privacy was going to be a very, very big discussion over the next 5 years. She said that to me over 5 years ago, and she was absolutely right. I just wonder, I mean, there are people who willingly give their information. I'm probably one of them, actually, Paul. What would you say to them?
Well, it'll come back to bite them at some stage.
Okay.
I'm not on the electoral register.
Right.
I have never in my life filled in a census form.
Really? Isn't that against the law?
No, never.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, Paul, listen, thanks. Very interesting to talk to you. I appreciate that. That's Paul in Bangor in Northern Ireland. Billy is on the west coast of Denmark and has given me a shout about Angela Rayner. Billy, what would you like to say?
Listen, Angela Rayner knew exactly what she was doing. She chanced her arm, she put her money on the table and got caught, or she put her money in her pocket and got caught. And that is the bottom line.
I mean, she says that she didn't. She says that she was given advice. She says that she did what she was advised to do. But you think she's pulling a fast one, Billy?
Of course, she's a Labour guy. How did she manage to get $3 million in the bank? Well, MP's salary.
Well, we don't know if she has $3 million in the bank, but we certainly know that she has 3 homes. One is paid for by the taxpayer. One is this nesting arrangement where her kids live there, and then she and her ex-husband go and look after the kids, and she lives in Hove. Do you have any sympathy for her whatsoever, or do you just think she should resign and be done with it?
Angela Rayner's got more moves than a Russian chess player. She should just resign, and that's it.
Okay. Billy, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Should say that it is actually illegal not to complete the UK census. You could face a fine of up to £1,000 for doing so. We're not going to be shopping Paul or giving any of his information to anybody. Don't worry about that. The information gathered, we are told by the government, is crucial for planning and funding essential services such as healthcare, education and transport. I did think it was illegal not to fill out the census because I remember it was this sort of weird set of circumstances. I was house sitting for my aunt who was in Australia at the time, and I said to the census person, well, we haven't filled out the census because my aunt's in Australia and she lives in this house, she owns this house. I don't. I was a student at the time and I was there for a few months kind of house sitting, which was really beneficial for me. And the census person said, no, just say you're here because you've got to fill in sort of on that day. And it was quite an onerous process, and I do wish that John Denver had been there to help me fill out my census. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Will Barker is with us. He's Deputy Head of News at The Sun. He's going to tell us what's in the paper tomorrow. And unsurprisingly, the pressure mounting on Angela Rayner is a major story for you.
Yes, well, our guys on The Sun and Sunday have sort of been leading the way on this. So they've been slowly chipping away. And they finally... Angela Rayner finally cracked this morning and gave an interview with Sky, as you probably well know, and sort of coughed to the fact that she has been underpaying on her stamp duty and is now in a lot of bother, and the sleazebusters going to be all over and working out, did she know, who knew? So we've got a list of 10 questions tomorrow that I think she needs to be answering on this whole subject.
Don't give me all 10 of them, but can you give me a flavour of what
Well, it's just an idea. When did you know?
Yeah.
Are you going to produce? Are you going to be
Who
printing
advised
out,
you?
Who advised you? Are you going to be printing that advice?
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, actually. We spoke to Sir Jake Berry a bit earlier on, former chairman of the Conservative Party, as you'll know, Will, and he said that actually he believes her statement and what she said to Sky News has actually raised more questions than it has answered.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think she is going to have to. Well, first of all, I guess she'll just wait until the verdict comes in on her, and then. Obviously, if she loses, she's probably going to have to go. A lot of people are calling, obviously, for her head already.
What's the Sun saying? Has the leader column written?
I couldn't tell you at this stage. It's sort of, we're getting close to it. But I mean, we've dubbed her Three Pads Rayner. This because she's obviously got the place in Hove, the one up north, and she's got a Grace and Favour place as well. We've had pictures of her down at the seaside, lounging around on the beach, and. Yeah, so she's got a bit of problems ahead of her, really.
Yeah, certainly, especially as she's been such an attack dog.
Yes.
On so many other people.
Well, also, I mean, that's the other thing.
Well.
We've got breakout on all the times that she's called for people's heads over their dodgy tax.
I'm surprised you can get all of them into one page of the newspaper.
Exactly.
My goodness. Let's talk about the head of the Metropolitan Police, actually, because this is really interesting that Sir Mark Rowley has issued a blistering statement calling for an immediate change in the law, insisting successive governments are to blame. This is over Graham Linehan and his arrest yesterday, and essentially you've got the top cop in the country saying the law's wrong.
Yeah, well. Our piece sort of goes on from there. I mean, I think the dust is sort of coming down after yesterday's arrest, and there's a real sort of finger pointing. It's quite interesting, really. So you've had Wes Streeting and Mark Rowley coming out today saying we've got to change the law. We were just upholding the laws that were there. Meanwhile, you've got Keir saying, well, we need to have some more common sort of sense policing. So they're sort of just pointing at each other going, well, you sort it out, no, you sort it out. And nobody seems to be sort of really taking account of all this. Meanwhile, Paul Graham's stuck in the middle of it all, waiting to see what happens with him.
I loved your front page this morning, by the way, with Father Jack on there, Britain's Fact. It reminded me of what we used to say in the Northern Ireland office when I was a special advisor, when, again, another Father Ted reference, when the latest talks process had failed, when we said, is there anything to be said for having another talks process? And we just have them over and over again. Tell us about those Premiership players who've been mocked about AI-style farewell messages.
So we've just had the end of the transfer window, and it's become a real trend now amongst football players where they sit there and they write these great kind of goodbye tweets or Instagram messages where there's lots of love about how their team, they love this team, love the club, etc, etc. Next day they go and put on a different shirt, write a post about how much they... So it's always a little bit insincere, but eagle-eyed fans have now spotted that there's a guy, Christiantus Uche, I think that's the right spelling, right pronunciation, and Fabio Silva, who's left Wolves. They've both written one of these posts, but if you look at them, put them together, they are exactly the same post. And so clearly, I don't know if it's an agent or AI or somebody somewhere along the line has just basically given them the same piece from the exact same phrasing. Obviously, there's a little gap in there where they have to put their old club,
of course,
and then put their new club and their name in there.
I love some of this language as well. I mean, it's you know, when I first arrived, I came full of ambition, dreams, and the desire to make a real impact. I know I didn't come close to meeting those expectations. Now it's time for a new chapter, but I won't forget where I've been. I mean, it's all very generic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we get, I don't know about you, but we get a lot of these sort of press releases now, which I think probably are written by AI.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's sort of full of language, and you can start to spot.
Well, parliamentarians as well. I mean, they're saying, I rise to speak in support of, is the way a lot of them start. And there's been a lot of analysis of that as well. Speaking of things that are similar, tell us about the UK's first Karen convention. This didn't go very well.
So there's a great eccentric, one of Britain's great eccentrics in Redditch, a guy called Kevin Beresford. Now, you might well have seen we've done lots of stories on him before. He loves making calendars, and he's made calendars of Jack Grealish's legs. He's made calendars of the greatest roundabouts in Britain, the greatest crossroads, all these kind of crazy, great sort of British eccentrics, as I say. And his latest idea has come up with a Karen calendar. I think he's called it a Karender. And so obviously you know what a Karen is. A sort of I checked it at the internet definition. It's basically a sort of a moaning middle-class woman, and he's assembled 12 Karens in Redditch and used them as a calendar. But I think he's great at quirky ideas. He's not so great at organising events. He then, as a launch event for this calendar, he then decided that he was going to create a Karen convention.
A Karenvention, as it were.
Karenvention, yes.
Thank you.
Very good. And then, printed loads of various posters, etc., at the Black Tap in Redditch, except he forgot to invite any of them, or certainly they didn't show up. Maybe they had a bit of a pout and refused to come. So he was just there on his own.
Complain to the manager.
Yeah, exactly. with only one woman there who was actually called Susan. It wasn't called Karen.
That's rather disappointing, really, isn't it? Yeah. Goodness me. I do. I feel so. I'm sort of obsessed with names. I always wanted to make a documentary called Being Fred West about all the people who. I mean, there apparently at the time I remember researching it. There were something like 78 people in the UK called Frederick West.
Yeah.
And I thought up until 1993, life's fine. Hiya, Fred. How's it going? And then suddenly, you're Fred West, and your whole life changes because of something you can't do. It's the same with people called Karen, and actually it's similar with names of pop stars and various things. They suddenly become a big thing. It's interesting as well that I actually spoke to a guy called David Gray in New Zealand. I was chatting to him one time. I said, you're called David Gray, like the singer David Gray. And he said, no, it's worse than that, because if it was just the singer, that would be fine. He's great and love his music and all the rest. There's a serial killer in New Zealand called David Gray, and I'm sure New Zealand's a lovely country, but not a huge amount happens there. And there's this sort of long trial about sort of grisly things that this serial killer had done, and chopping people up and putting them in the freezer and stuff like that. And this guy said, all these people, anywhere he went, anytime he said his name, they said, are you going to chop me up and put me in the freezer? And he had to take 6 months off work with stress. Because his name was David Gray. I think it's really interesting. So I feel slightly sorry for people called Karen. I think Karen's a lovely name.
Yeah. I've got a weird one. Next week there's a Will Barker starring in The Sun.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never met somebody with my name, and now he's turned up in the newsroom as well.
How are you going to, sort of express presumably you're senior to him.
Yes.
So say, I'm the real Will
exactly.
Barker.
I think I'll be number one, and maybe he can be number two.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a guy actually who went on to be quite a senior executive at Sky called Mike Wilson. There was the business editor was called Mike Wilson years ago. Maybe you remember seeing him on TV. And there's another guy called Mike Wilson, and he worked in planning, and like throughout his career, he's still working, but throughout sort of the 20-25 years he was at Sky, he was known as Mike Plan. That was like his name. He was just Mike Plan. That was his name. Yeah. Anyway, they were slightly off topic, but plenty to discuss, and plenty in the Sun tomorrow. Will, thank you very much. I wish you well in your battle with the other Will Barker. Will the real Will Barker please stand up? Will Barker, Deputy Head of News at the Sun. Get your thoughts in about this. Maybe you've had some name dilemmas. You've got 12 minutes to tell me about them before 7 o'clock. Alex Phillips is coming up after that time. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. The number, as you know, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I do not think that, every single nanny state issue is an issue with children. I mean, I definitely think that children should be restricted from accessing certain things. For example, I think it's right that under 18s cannot buy cigarettes. Even though they're able to access it, I do think that having a legal age limit is right when it comes to those products. But when it comes to the energy drinks industry, what they have done is the government is looking at targeting one industry when it makes absolutely no sense in terms of the actual harm that it has. I mean, children, about 10% of the caffeine that they're drinking is from energy drinks, right?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, something weird has happened in the last few minutes. Hugh Bonneville, who is the star of Downton Abbey, has given an interview, a live interview to ITV News. I think it's the London news for ITV. And what has happened is, instead of talking about Downton Abbey, he's used his platform on television to talk about Gaza. We can't play you the clip just now because we've literally just received it. It's just going around Twitter, so we can't get it into our system in the next 9 minutes, although if we do, we'll play it. I would imagine Alex Phillips will play it. But I can play it off Twitter. This has happened on ITV News. I'm just going to play you off my phone, literally the sound of what Hugh Bonneville has done. Instead of talking about the film, this is what he's talked about.
Hello, well, after 6 seasons, 2 movies, we've got the final chapter of Downton Abbey, and who better to speak to about that than Hugh Bonneville? He's been there from the very start.
Hello, good evening. Before I talk about the fluff and loveliness of our wonderful film, what's about to happen in Gaza City is indefensible. The international community must do more to bring it to an end. Downton Abbey is a lovely film, and we're going to...
So that's Hugh Bonneville there, the star of stage and screen at the final chapter of Downton Abbey, and he's used that interview, straightforward interview, with a young reporter called Helen. Her name is, I think, Helen. I can't see her name, but anyway, she's a young reporter. She's Helen Keenan is her name. She's been out asking Hugh Bonneville these really straightforward questions on the red carpet, talking about that, and he's hijacked that on live TV to talk about Gaza. Now, he may well feel very, very strongly about that. I don't think that's particularly fair. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Or maybe you think that's his free speech and that's something he should do. Let's talk about free speech now with Dave in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, another lovey going down that road. He doesn't care about Gaza. He just cares about his reputation with the other acting fraternity. But I was trying to help you out with your Nottingham Post thing you've got going on. You seem quite animated by the fact that Reform have kind of boycotted them. But I mean, when you think about it, the Labour politicians never ever, or very, very rarely, ever talk to GB News or talkTV, or whenever the Prime Minister's doing one of his conferences, he'll talk to everybody, right the way down to the Croydon Gazette before he finally asked GB
It's a very fair point, actually, Dave, and there are many politicians who avoid specific journalistic outlets. There are many politicians who, and it's up to them who they talk to, and I don't think for a second that any journalistic outlet has a God-given divine right to talk to any politician. And if Reform UK want to not talk to the Nottingham Post, that's up to them. I just think it would be nice if they did, and it would be nice if we got more Labour politicians and more cabinet ministers on here. I'd love to interview them.
No. I'd go further. I mean, when Richard Tice and Zia Youssef did a really, really good launch presentation on Monday, they started with the BBC, I think. And when you look at what those journalists wrote about it, it was either nothing, i.e. they didn't even report on it because they went and asked some other question, probably a Gaza question, and they don't actually report on it. So if I was the marketing team at Reform, I'd go down every single journalist that asked a question of Richard Tyson's ear the other day. I'd go and see what they wrote, and if they didn't write anything at all, I'd strike them off the list and wouldn't have them at the next one.
What I would be really interested in seeing is the BBC front page of their website, because I'm fairly sure, I was told this about half an hour ago, and I think it's still the case, that the BBC website, which is, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, along New York Times, Mail Online, various others, one of the biggest websites, news websites in the world. You're talking about hundreds of millions of people use the BBC's website, and they have nothing, nada, zilch, about what Nigel Farage has said about free speech in Washington at the moment on their front page, to the best of my knowledge. That is certainly what I've been told in the last half an hour or so. So you make some really good points, Dave. I want, it's funny for me, actually, having worked in politics and then also being a journalist. I mean, I want all politicians to talk to all journalists as much as possible. Reform, they can do what they want, really, I suppose, when it comes to that. But I do think it's at least worth asking the question, Dave, about free speech when you're not talking to certain media outlets.
Yeah, I agree, but I think just for the hell of it, if I was Richard Tice, I would have gone down 40 different journalists until I got down to the Sutton Gazette. And then I said, oh, yeah, one last question from the BBC. I'd put them at the back, because they're actually not part of the narrative anymore. As you say, they don't cover what's going on anyway. They cover their stuff. So I think people have just stopped listening to them.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on that, Dave. We are listening to you, and we're listening to everybody who's in touch with us, including Chris in Hereford, who has some thoughts on Angela Rayner. Chris, what would you like to say?
Oh, it's just a quick one. I think she should resign, because she's been a bit of a hypocrite here, because like 2 or 3 years ago, I can remember her saying about the Conservative government, how corrupt they were. And
she's called for a lot of people to resign, Chris.
Yeah, and I think the only problem is, what I think is, if she does resign, does that really put any pressure on Keir Starmer's premiership? Because
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, Chris, because if she resigns, then the problem kind of goes away. It also means that both Rachel Reeves, who is very weakened at the moment and may not last another year or so, and Angela Rayner are, taken out as rivals for Keir Starmer. What do you think of that, Chris?
Well, the thing is, if they wanted to boot Keir Starmer out, if the Angela Rayner being Prime Minister, if she goes and Keir Starmer goes, well, to be honest, I know it's 3.5 years to an election, but the